Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto's experiments with his ungodly amount of chakra take the elemental nations by surprise. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A 6-year-old boy, with impossibly bright yellow hair, was panting and sweating as he performed push-ups in a small grassy field. Well, tried to anyway. Arms shaking, Naruto Uzumaki, persona non grata in the ninja village of Konoha, prankster extraordinaire, and determined to become the strongest shinobi his village had ever seen, gritted his teeth as he tried, and failed, to perform the next set of push-ups. Come on! Just one more! I can do this, Dadabayo! Come on, stupid arms, work, damn it, work! The child yelled inside his head, glaring at his trembling arms as if they were the cause for everything that was evil in the world. Sadly, his glare was insufficient to keep him up, and with a soft thud, young Naruto's body fell to the ground. Naruto groaned in defeat, before rolling over so he was lying on his back, looking at the clouds that were lazily drifting by overhead. Unknown to him, many Nara were currently doing the same. Still lying on his back, disappointment clearly on his face, Naruto heard the grunts and pants of his fellow classmates, as they too struggled with the exercise. His class was outside on one of the training fields of the Ninja Academy, the teachers finding the pleasantly sunny day to be perfect to engage the class in some physical exercises. The class disagreed. Still, the rest of Naruto's classmates had noticeably less difficulty with the exercise than he did. This wasn't very unusual, given that many of Naruto's classmates were several years older than Naruto was, the 6-year-old having applied for the academy at a far younger age than usual. As a result, whenever they were assigned physical activities, Naruto would almost always fall behind. The only exception to this was whenever the assignment was endurance-related, Naruto having not met anybody who was his equal where stamina was considered. Not that that mattered to the young child, who, with the logic all 6-year-old boys possess, thought that physical strength was both the coolest and most important thing a shinobi to be could have. This led to some sneers being sent at the small blonde, who had by now finally regained his breath and was now sitting up, looking dejectedly at his hands. Why am I so weak? Shinobi are supposed to be strong, right? How can I ever become a shinobi if I'm not strong? Naruto thought to himself, so absorbed in his thoughts he didn't even register the sandal-clad feet standing in front of him, before a bellow brought him back to the real world with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Uzumaki! The small child yelped in surprise, almost flying a few feet off the ground in shock, before realizing who had called his name. He gave a sheepy grin at his academy instructor, scuffing his feet. Considering the man's furious expression, Naruto didn't think he was impressed. Uzumaki, the man ground out between clenched teeth, do you mind telling me why you are sitting here daydreaming instead of finishing the exercise like I told you to? Naruto clenched his jaw before looking at his feet, mumbling something lowly under his breath. What was that? Speak up, Uzumaki, I didn't hear you. The blonde winced at the harsh tone before speaking up a little louder. I said that the exercise is too difficult, the boy said softly, feeling more than seeing how the eyes of the rest of the class were fixed on him. The instructor's face went an interesting, if alarming, shade of red, and his nostrils flared to an impressive size. Naruto hunched in on himself, anticipating the tirade that was sure to follow. Too difficult? Too difficult? That's it, Uzumaki. I won't take any excuses like that to cover up your laziness any longer. You will do these push-ups and you will stay on this field until all your push-ups are done. Understand me, Uzumaki? The man roared at Naruto, nearly bowling the small child over with the sheer volume of his voice. Tears sprang unbidden up into the young boy's eyes, though he refused to let them fall. It's not fair. I'm not lazy. I'm not. These exercises are all for the bigger kids, not for me. It's not fair, Naruto thought to himself in a mix of frustration, anger, and sadness. He gave a small nod to his instructor and dropped down on his hands and feet, and started continuing his push-ups. He was forced to continue long after the last bell had rung, signaling the end of the school day. A tired, battered, and dirty Naruto shuffled along the streets to the small apartment he called home. He was too tired to even be bothered by the angry glares and derisive sneers that were sent his way by nearly everybody on the streets. He simply trudged along, his mind solely focused on the seemingly impossible task of setting one foot in front of the other. As a result, he didn't look up in time to see a tall person standing in his way holding a very large box. With a small yelp of surprise, Naruto ran into the man, who appeared to barely register the impact. Unlike Naruto, who was rubbing his head in equal parts of pain and confusion. Damn. It's like I walked into a wall instead of a person, the young boy thought to himself, before blanching that he had walked into someone. While for anybody else this may have been simply the cause for some embarrassment, for Naruto it was far worse. Usually the villagers left him alone, something they made sure to remind him of in the most hurtful of ways. However, walking into someone would give them the excuse to at least smack him around the ears for a bit. Disciplinary action, they would call it. So it was with great fear as Naruto looked up at the man he had just collided with. Or at least tried to. The man's torso and head were obscured by the enormous box the man was carrying, the reason why he hadn't seen Naruto. Briefly Naruto thought about making a break for it, but any hope for escape was dashed when a spiky-haired head peered around the side of the box, looking around confusedly, before landing on the small, prone and dirty form of Naruto Uzumaki. "Oh. Hey kid, didn't see you there," the man said jovially. Naruto was surprised at the mild reaction at first. He scrutinized the face of the man in front of him and released a quiet breath when he saw the man's forehead protector. A ninja then? Naruto didn't mind ninjas so much, mostly because they didn't mind him, as long as he wasn't playing pranks. The ninja set his box on the ground before crouching in front of Naruto, a concerned look on his face. "You okay, kid?" Naruto mutely nodded, unsure what to do with this positive attention that was given to him. Usually it came only from the nice people at Ichiraku's or else the old man Hokage, but the rest of the ninjas usually tried to simply ignore him. Another voice called out above the din of people walking up and down the streets. "Kotetsu! Kotetsu, what's the hold up? Hey Izumo! Over here!" Another ninja joined the first one, an irritated expression on his face that made Naruto shrink back out of habit. He didn't need to worry though, as the second shinobi lost his expression when he saw Naruto's sweaty and dirty clothes and distraught expression. "What happened, Kotetsu?" the newcomer asked in a far more relaxed tone of voice. "I ran into little Naruto here, quite literally in fact," the one called Kotetsu quipped back, before turning to Naruto. "Speaking of, what are you doing out here, kid? It's getting pretty late, and you look like hell." This earned him a slap around the head from Izumo, annoyed expression back on his face. "Oh. What? He does." Another slap. "That doesn't mean you have to say it straight to his face, you buffoon." Kotetsu opened his mouth to retort, but was stopped by a soft, giggling sound coming from somewhere around his knees. Both shinobi looked down to see Naruto laughing at the pair of ninja in front of him. When he saw them looking at him, however, he quickly clasped a hand over his mouth, while feeling an impressive blush crawl up his face. Izumo and Kotetsu simply smiled, before Izumo squatted down so he could look Naruto in the eye. "Still, Naruto, Kotetsu is right. It is getting rather late, and you don't look your best. Why are you still out here? Didn't the academy finish a few hours ago?" Izumo asked in a gentle voice. Naruto bit his lip, looking from Izumo to Kotetsu and back again. Feeling somewhat encouraged by their friendly faces and attitudes, Naruto told them what had happened during his school day. As he finished his tale, Naruto looked sadly down at his feet, missing the angry expressions the two shinobi in front of him sent each other after hearing the treatment the small child had received from his teacher. "I just don't get it," Naruto said softly to himself, catching the attention of Izumo and Kotetsu. "What is it you don't get, Naruto?" Izumo asked gently of the blonde boy. Naruto looked up at the two ninja, unshed tears in his eyes. "Well, ninja are strong, right? And I know the exercises at the academy will make me strong too, so I can be a ninja too. But I'm too weak to do the exercises, so does that mean I can never be a ninja?" Naruto asked with a trembling voice. It was his greatest fear, to not be a ninja, since becoming one was his biggest dream. His only dream. It was what allowed him to wake up in the morning and face the rest of his shitty day with a beaming smile on his face, because no matter what, Naruto Uzumaki was going to be the best damn ninja the Leaf had ever had, Databayo. Except now, doubt had begun to set in if his dream was even attainable in the first place. He was brought out of his thoughts by Kotetsu placing a large hand on his narrow shoulder, a grin on his face. "Don't you worry, kid. Sure you can become a ninja. Do you think ninja get their strength from just physical exercise? If that was the case, then there'd be a lot more civilians in the shinobi business, don't you think?" Naruto nodded his head, despite not being sure he completely understood what Kotetsu was trying to say. Something Izumo obviously picked up on, because the man gave a sigh, before giving Kotetsu a firm shove, sending the spiky-haired man face first into the dirt. Naruto withheld a snort of amusement, not willing to antagonize one of the two friendly shinobi he knew, before focusing on Izumo, who was looking at him intently. What Kotetsu was trying to say, and miserably failed at, hey, is that shinobi don't rely solely on physical strength. Sure, it's important, but what gives a shinobi his strength is chakra. Do you know what chakra is, Naruto? Izumo asked. Naruto scrunched up his face. Classes at the academy were hard, both because of the course material being intended for children older than him and because of the negative attitude from both his teachers and his peers. As a result, Naruto didn't have the most stellar performance in the academy. Chakra is of the energy stuff. Right. It lets you do jutsu? He asked, unsure of himself. Izumo opened his mouth to answer but was cut off by Kotetsu. Sure thing, kid, close enough, for now at least. But it doesn't just let you do jutsu. If you call on it and focus it to run through your body becomes stronger and faster and becomes more durable. Kotetsu exclaimed with great enthusiasm. A light lit up in Naruto's eyes. Really? Kotetsu grinned. Really? Here, try to lift this box. A little surprised at the odd request, Naruto simply shrugged his shoulders and decided to humor the man. After all, they had been nice so far, and Kotetsu had been carrying the box around without any problems. So how heavy could it be? Very heavy, it appeared. Naruto grunted, his fingers scrabbling against the box, trying to lift it, or at the very least nudge it a little bit. The box didn't budge. Not even slightly. Naruto let out a huff of frustration and tiredness. Kotetsu clapped him on the back, grin still on his face. No worries, kid. You see, without chakra I probably couldn't lift this thing myself. With chakra, however, Kotetsu trailed off, his grin growing even wider. He cracked his knuckles before walking over to the box and with a flourish, lifted the entire thing in a single smooth movement above his head. Kotetsu laughed at Naruto when the boy's jaw dropped in shock, while Izumo looked on with a small smile. As Kotetsu put the box back down, after all, with or without chakra, the thing was damned heavy, Naruto found his voice again. That's so cool. So I can do that too? As long as I use chakra? The small boy yelled excitedly. Izumo chuckled, placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder in order to keep the hyperactive blonde from literally bouncing in place. Yes, Naruto, when you have unlocked your chakra you can steer the flow of it through your body, and use it to strengthen your body. If you use a little chakra, you become a little stronger. If you use a lot of chakra you become a lot stronger. Cool. The small boy yelled, drawing a few glares from some bystanders. Naruto didn't care though. It would seem his dream was still attainable. As soon as he learned how to unlock his chakra he would be the strongest shinobi ever, Dadabayo. Naruto stood in the middle of the deserted academy training ground, the school having already finished for the day, both teachers and students eagerly having headed home. Naruto, however, had some far more important things to do before he could even think about going back to his apartment. It had been a little over 2 months after he had met Izumo and Kotetsu. A little over 2 months since he learned that the secret to a shinobi's strength was his chakra. A little over 2 months of agonized waiting for the moment where he finally learned to unlock his own chakra. That moment had been today. The teachers had deemed them ready and had spent the entire day on the theory behind unlocking one's chakra. It was the first time Naruto had managed to keep his attention on the material for an entire lesson. After the instructors had finally gotten through the entire theory, the day had already come to an end and the students were dismissed with the promise of the application of the theory tomorrow, and the threat of bodily harm should they try to do it themselves before then. However, after spending 2 months of waiting already, Naruto couldn't wait any longer. Which led him to standing alone in a deserted training ground, his feet spread evenly apart, his hands in the ram's seal and his eyes scrunched up in concentration. Breathe. Breathe. Find your center. Feel the warm glow of your chakra, hidden inside of you. Draw it out and hold it. And breathe. Naruto kept chanting the theory in his head, trying to look inwards like the instructors had told them. He had been at it for a few hours now and still hadn't found the glow the instructors had talked about. However, he had become really bored. Breathe. As a result, he slowly lost his rigid stance, his furrowed brow smoothing out. Breathe. His mind, noisy with the mantra he kept repeating over and over, quieted to a serene silence. Breathe. Slowly, without Naruto even consciously aware of it, his mind turned inwards. Wait, what? There was no glow as from a candle, like the instructors had told them, the candle representing their chakra. No, what Naruto encountered was as far removed from a candle like an ocean was to a glass of water. Had Naruto not been speechless with what he was seeing, feeling, experiencing, he would have compared his chakra to a sun instead of a measly candle. At first, the unexpected frightened Naruto, and he kept away from the enormous light and warmth. But the warmth seeped into his bones, warming him up pleasantly, and the light felt soothing on his skin. Slowly, with a blissful smile on his face, Naruto let himself be enveloped by the benevolent light. Had anyone been present, they would have seen Naruto light up like a beacon, before a blue, flame-like light shimmered into existence around the boy, swirling around his body like a maelstrom, slightly grooving the ground beneath his feet. Naruto didn't notice though. The light felt so good on his skin, in his bones, running through his veins. Chakra is so awesome, the thought floated through his mind. This brought him out of his semi-delirious state. Naruto snapped to attention. Chakra! I have found my chakra! Now I need to draw it out, Naruto thought happily to himself, even as he felt a little saddened at having to leave the warmth of this light. He slowly drifted out of the center of the light back to his consciousness, his chakra still surrounding him, trailing away from the source. As Naruto came back into his own consciousness, he could feel the chakra running through their pathways through his entire body. It was as if instead of the light surrounding him like it had, he was now surrounding the light. Naruto grinned and opened his eyes, not knowing they were glowing impossibly bright with an inner light. Naruto retook his stance, chakra still swirling around him. He concentrated, feeling the chakra flow through his body. Wait, a thought suddenly broke through his concentration. I apparently have a lot of chakra. Izumo said that the more chakra you use, the stronger your body becomes. So what happens when I draw out even more chakra? Naruto thought to himself, starting a train of thought that would change the history of the elemental nations. But that was still a few years off though. For now, Naruto simply grinned, the same way he would when he was about to pull a particularly spectacular prank, and closed his eyes. Focusing on the warm feeling that had enveloped him not so long ago, he drew more of it out. The swirling chakra around him grew even larger, churning faster and faster, the ground beneath Naruto's feet scarred with deep grooves. Naruto didn't notice though, he simply kept his eyes closed and focused on drawing more and more chakra out. By now, several shinobi and even a few civilians had taken notice of the enormous chakra being emitted from around the Hokage Tower, where the academy was located. The Hokage himself, a wizened old man in white robes with a wide hat on his face, sat up straighter in his chair, eyes widened in shock. Naruto? The man asked softly, chewing nervously on his unlit pipe, before reaching for a crystal ball. Unaware of the unrest he was stirring up, Naruto was still drawing on his chakra, though he was frowning now. Calling on his chakra had become uncomfortable, not exactly painful yet, but Naruto didn't like the feeling nonetheless. On top of that, instead of being pleasantly warmed by the light running through his veins, his body now felt as if he was burning up from a fever. This is it, Naruto thought to himself, gritting his teeth. He opened his eyes, and focused on a young tree nearby, for no other reason that it stood closest to him. Cocking his fist back and forcing the light in his body to run through his limbs and pool in his bald hand, Naruto bent his knees, preparing to rush forward. Due to his focus on his target, and because he held his clenched fist a little behind him, he didn't see chakra beginning to swirl around his fist and forearm, coating it in a violently churning shroud of chakra. As Naruto prepared to take off, several ninja managed to reach his training ground. Among these shinobi were the majority of the senseis of what would later be recognized across the elemental nations as the Rookie 12. Right on their heels was the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi himself. Naruto! He called out in shock. Within him, and most of the other shinobi present, worry wrestled with pride. To call upon one's chakra at such a young age was impressive. Not to speak of the truly gargantuan amount the child was channeling, making it visible as a swirling shroud around him. However, calling upon one's chakra wasn't without its own risks. There was a reason why it was always done supervision after all. Not to mention what kind of damage channeling such large amounts of chakra could do to such a small body. Naruto heard his Jiji's call, recognized the worry in the aged Hokage's voice, but discovered that he couldn't stop. The sheer amount of chakra had already been called upon and now demanded an outlet. It hurt trying to hold it back, so, in what would later be regarded as a typical Naruto-like leap of logic, Naruto decided to continue instead. With a yell that to the surrounding shinobi sounded more like a roar that shook the earth, Naruto pushed off, shunting power into his legs, and shattering the ground beneath him as a result. Faster than a regular eye could track, Naruto shot forwards, a blinding blue blur, streaking across the training field, creating a deep furrow into the ground, shocking many of the watching ninja. Naruto, however, was simply scared. Everything was going so fast. He couldn't see anything, the world around him dissolving into a blur, except for the young tree he had elected to serve as his practice target. Deciding that hitting the tree with his face would be a lot more painful than hitting it with his fist, Naruto shot his fist forward, only now noticing with amazement the way his swirling chakra coated his hand all the way up to the elbow. He had no time to think anything of it though, because then the tree was suddenly right there and Naruto managed a single shriek of fear before the world lit up before going dark. Hiruzen held his hand across his face, blocking out the brilliant light as Naruto collided with the tree. He couldn't block the deafening sound though, a bone-rattling boom that shook the earth. As the light died away, Hiruzen removed his hand, not bothering to hide his worried expression. "Kami, Naruto, what have you done?" the elderly man asked himself silently. He quickly rushed towards Naruto, sensing Kakashi and his son Asuma, as well as a few others doing the same. When he arrived at where Naruto had collided with the tree, his face lost all color, hand clutching at his breast in fear. Vaguely his mind distractedly noticed one of the female shinobi throwing up, his son comforting her. He couldn't really blame the woman. Only willpower and a lifetime of seeing similar or worse and brutal wars kept him from following her example. Because there, lying in a blackened crater, with his shirt shredded and unconscious, was Naruto. His right arm, though it couldn't really be called an arm anymore. As far as Hiruzen could see, there simply wasn't any skin left, exposing the red muscle underneath to the air. What was left of it anyway? Most of it was as blackened as the ground Naruto was lying on. Stark white bones stuck out of his arm at odd intervals, standing in sharp contrast to the boy's flesh. Hiruzen fell to his knees next to his surrogate grandson, unheeding of how the charred earth smeared soot across his pristine white robes. Slowly, as if afraid he may harm the boy should he move too fast, Hiruzen placed his fingers on Naruto's throat. "Please! Please, Kami, revered and honored ancestors, please, anybody, let him have a pulse, please, let him have a pu dash." Thud thud. Hiruzen almost cried with relief as underneath his fingers he felt a steady, if faint, heartbeat. Looking up in the worried face of Hatake Kakashi, Hiruzen let out a shaky smile, before nodding once, not trusting his voice right now. Obviously Kakashi understood what he meant, because the elite jounin let out an explosive sigh, before sinking to the ground next to Hiruzen, dragging a shaky hand across his face. Around them, relieved murmuring was heard as Naruto's status of remaining amongst the living spread. Neither man bothered to pay attention, looking at the unconscious Naruto with unblinking intensity, as if afraid that if they looked away for even a second, Naruto would slip away. Given how hurt he was, the fear was not unfounded. Hiruzen felt a hand clamp on his shoulder, as the scent of tobacco his nose. "Medics are on their way, and an emergency operating room is being prepared as we speak," Sarutobi Asuma said to him in a soft voice, any animosity between father and son shoved to the background in the face of this crisis. Hiruzen patted his son's hand and nodded, acknowledging the message. He would much rather take Naruto himself and shunch into the hospital, but that could easily aggravate Naruto's wounds even further. No, best to let the professionals take over. For now. Suddenly a silence fell across the clearing as Naruto groaned. Hiruzen was at his side so fast it put the Hiraishin to shame. "Shush, Naruto, it's going to be alright, okay? You just need to lay still. Do you hear me, Naruto?" Hiruzen said, trying, and failing, to keep the worry out of his voice, not wanting to scare the boy he considered his grandson. An affirmative grunt was his response before Naruto turned around, looking up at Hiruzen with pained eyes. Suddenly the boy let out a shaky grin. "I did it, Gigi. I unlocked my chakra. I'm going to be super strong now, Gigi, Databeo." Naruto managed to croak, a victorious expression on his soot-covered face. "I did it, Gigi," Naruto trailed off as he fell unconscious again. Hiruzen laughed shakily, running a hand through his hair, not caring he knocked off his ceremonial hat in the process. He looked around the small crater where there once used to be a tree, before turning to look at the direction Naruto had punched in, several slack-jawed ninja already walking across it. "I would say that you did indeed, Naruto," Hiruzen managed, while beside him Kakashi lifted his forehead protector in disbelief. Where once had been a part of the small forest, there now was a clearing, starting from the crater where Naruto was lying in, then fanning out to a diameter of about 20 meters and continuing on for almost twice that, felled trees littering the ground, their scorched barks making the ground appear to be black. "You did indeed." Drip. 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 The hallway was shrouded in darkness. It ended in a large, square room, which was lighted by no visible means, and was flooded by murky water, which came up to slightly above the ankle. On the opposite side of the dark hallway, the wall of the room was replaced by thick golden bars, reaching up from the ground to the impossibly high ceiling. They appeared to be held closed by a relatively small scrap of paper, on which the kanji for seal was inscribed in black ink. In front of the bars, floating on his back, was a small blonde child, unconscious. Which was probably a good thing, as the child most likely would have been scared out of his mind by what awoke behind the enormous bars. Two blood-red slitted eyes opened in the darkness that mirrored the hallway. Each eye was as large as an average man was tall, and both focused with unnatural intensity on the small figure floating in front of them, so close, but out of their reach because of the bars in between them. For now. A dark chuckling came from the inky blackness, shaking the room as if there was a particularly violent earthquake. So, the jailer finally meets his prisoner. A malevolent voice rumbled across the vast emptiness of the room. A wide grin, filled with enormous teeth, appeared underneath the glowing red eyes, each tooth glinting with sharpness, creating a truly terrifying image. And what a meeting it shall be! The voice continued ominously, before it retreated back into the darkness of its prison. The small child hadn't stirred even once. It was a beautiful day in the ninja village of Konoha. The sun was shining brightly, basking the land in a warm glow, while a gentle breeze kept the temperature pleasantly cool. Birds were singing amongst the great trees surrounding the village, while in the underbrush, small critters flew back and forth, either for food or fun. Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't notice any of this. The elderly Hokage's attention was focused solely on the small figure lying in the bed in front of him. Right arm swaddled in bandages, along with most of the rest of his body, Naruto Uzumaki was lying peacefully on the bed, looking as if he was merely asleep. Hiruzen turned his tired gaze to the nurse next to him, who had just run the latest batch of tests. Any change in his condition? The nurse looked up from her clipboard on which she had been furiously scribbling, only to give her leader a small shake of her head. The Hokage sighed, before turning to look at Naruto, just like he had been doing since the child had been brought into the hospital. Hokage-sama. Hiruzen gave a small, reassuring smile, though his eyes didn't leave his surrogate grandson for even a second. You may take your leave now, Nurse-san. I will alert the nearest medic should he wake, he said warmly, expressing his gratitude through the tone of his voice. Apparently satisfied that her charge would be looked after, the nurse bowed curtly, before quickly leaving Naruto's room. As soon as the door clicked closed, a man stepped out from the shadows of one of the corners of the room. Hiruzen didn't even twitch at the sudden appearance of the ninja. He had sensed the man the moment he had stepped foot in the hospital, after all. Salamander, the Hokage said, acknowledging the man's presence, but still not looking away from Naruto's unconscious form. Hokage-sama, the masked ninja replied, before joining his leader at the foot end of the hospital bed. Silence reigned between the two men, only disturbed by the rhythmic beating of the heart monitor attached to Naruto. Hiruzen gave another sigh, before turning to address his ANBU commander. What's the situation, Salamander? The commander straightened, snapping to attention immediately, and gave his report in clipped tones. Sir, the area around Uzumaki's accident had been cordoned off, while those who were present have all been ordered to consider what happened in S-rank secret for now, until you have assigned it a proper ranking. In the meantime, several of ANBU's best have investigated the area of Uzumaki's accident. Hiruzen nodded before asking the question which answer he dreaded more than anything. And what was the result of the investigation? Did Naruto-kun use any of its chakra? The elderly Hokage asked, though his voice was calm and steady, even as his inside were squirming around. No, Hokage-sama. It was the first thing our best sensors tried to find out, and they have universally come to the conclusion that all the chakra used by Uzumaki was his own. Hiruzen managed to contain his sigh at the last second, though he couldn't help the relieved sagging of his posture. If his commander noticed, then the man wisely didn't say anything. The third Hokage turned back to Naruto's sleeping form. Well, that's a small comfort at least, Hiruzen muttered to himself. The commander cleared his throat. Through sheer willpower, Hiruzen managed to keep himself from groaning, though he turned to the ANBU with narrowed eyes. Taking that as his cue, the masked ninja continued. What should we tell the public, Hokage-sama? Many amongst our ninja forces have noticed the enormous amounts of chakra that young Uzumaki-san drew upon. When his teachers notice his absence in the coming days, they will draw conclusions, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen did groan this time. And because it was ANBU who handled the investigation, we can't even use the records of their findings to calm the people. the third said in a frustrated voice. The Hokage walked towards one of the windows, looking out across his village, hands clasped behind his back, as his wrinkled brow wrinkled even further as the old man thought deep and hard about what action he should take. Kami, I wish I had my pipe right now, he thought mournfully. The ANBU remained standing at attention, patiently waiting for his leader to come up with whatever action they should take. He didn't have to wait very long. Hiruzen turned away from the window with a twinkle in his eye. We tell them the truth. Had the ANBU not worn his signature mask, the world would have been treated to a slack-jawed ANBU commander, a rare sight indeed. Hokage-sama? The ninja asked hesitantly. Not the entire truth, of course. We will simply say that young Uzumaki had been attempting to unlock his chakra, as was instructed, but made a mistake in doing so, and released far more than he had intended to summon. It was never involved as our beloved Yandame's seal still holds strong and wouldn't allow it. Young Naruto shall be kept under observation to monitor any possible damage he has done to himself. Make sure to mention the seal in the statement, Salamander. Yes, Hokage-sama. It shall be done. But the ANBU trailed off. Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Yes, Salamander. Permission to speak freely, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen's other eyebrow joined its brother in a journey to his hairline. It was a very unusual question to be asked by an ANBU commander. Hiruzen could in fact recall all previous instances on one hand, and 3 of those had been during wartime. Permission granted, Salamander. Speak your mind. Hiruzen said, curious what his commander wanted to say, unfiltered by protocol or decorum. The ANBU nodded and relaxed his stance somewhat. Hokage-sama, what do we do with the destructive capabilities of Uzumaki's experimentation? Our sensors came to the conclusion that the technique Uzumaki used was rather unfocused. With proper training and control, the results could be impressive. For the second time in as many minutes, Hiruzen's eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. Indeed? That's most impressive. The elderly Hokage mused, looking at the child in the hospital bed. Such strength. Such power. At such a young age, too. Minato-kun, Kushina-chan, you would be proud of your son, the aged ninja thought fondly to himself, before frowning in thought. Salamander is correct though. Whatever Naruto did, we cannot let this go unsupervised. He needs training in order to avoid getting into accidents like this again. Not to mention Danzo is probably already aware of Naruto's feat, and he'll be even more eager to get his claws into him. But who else? Hiruzen thought to himself, absently stroking his beard. Suddenly a grin stretched across the aged Hokage's face, making the ANBU commander suddenly very nervous. Salamander-san. Hiruzen intoned gravely, a silence falling across the room as the ANBU awaited his next order in trepidation. Get me Gaikun. Inside the large room, the small child groaned in discomfort. Ugh, what happened? Young Naruto moaned as he sat upright, rubbing his head. He opened his eyes, taking in the cavernous room and the enormous golden bars in front of him. Better yet, where am I? The ninja to be, asked himself. An ominous rumbling shook the room, making Naruto's teeth clatter. It took a few moments before the blonde child realized the grumbling sound was something chuckling. Instinctually realizing that for something to produce such a sound, it was probably far, far bigger than he was, Naruto huddled in on himself in fear. 2 glowing red orbs appeared in front of him, each one easily twice his own height. Then Naruto saw the slits in the orbs and realized that they were in fact eyes. Fully confronted with the massiveness of the being in front of him, despite not being able to see the rest of the creature's body, Naruto whimpered and quickly scrambled away from the enormous golden bars. An enormous grin, filled with impossibly sharp teeth, stretched itself wide below the 2 eyes. Ha! Do I frighten you so much, small one? That would make you smarter than most of your pitiful kind then. Despite previous evidence to the contrary. The massive being sneered at Naruto, trying, and somewhat succeeding, in cowing the young child. It had, however, forgotten one important thing. Naruto was used to being sneered at, ironically because of the creature itself. So when confronted with the unknown and dangerous, Naruto would react as any other would have, with a healthy amount of fear. But confronted with the familiar, no matter how scary, Naruto reacted in his usual manner. Which was shouting. Loudly. Not entirely sure what the being had meant, but pretty sure he had just been insulted, Naruto sprung to his feet, a small finger pointing accusingly at the monstrous being behind the golden bars. Shut up, meanie! I am Naruto Uzumaki, Databeo. I'm gonna be the best Hokage there ever was, so there. Satisfied with his foolproof argument, Naruto smirked and crossed his arms in front of his small chest. There was a short, stunned silence as the eyes focused on Naruto with incredulity. Then, "Wahahohahohahoheya-heya-ha." It laughed. The room shook with the sheer sound the being's laughter, dust shaken loose from the high ceiling. "That is your defense? You shall become Hokage? Ha! I take back what I said, you are most definitely not smart in any conceivable way," the monstrous being said disdainfully. Naruto scowled at his tormentor. He didn't understand all of the big words, but he knew when someone was insulting him. It came from experience. "Oh yeah? Well, I'm still gonna be Hokage, no matter what you say, so you just wait until I prove you wrong. Nothing can stop me, Databeo," Naruto shouted back, storming up to the bars. The enormous glowing eyes lowered closer to the ground, looking Naruto straight in the eye. "Oh, but I can, little one." Before Naruto could really interpret the being's words, he had to jump back, his reflexes saving him from being smashed to a pulp by the enormous claws that slammed down where Naruto had been standing mere moments before. The room shook at the impact, amplified by the enormous roar the creature unleashed in frustration. "Rah! Get closer, so I may kill you, you miserable wretch! Get closer, and I shall finally be able to free myself," the being roared, trashing about in its prison, smashing against the bars. As it did so, it finally came into the light, giving Naruto his first glimpse of his prisoner. He didn't like what he saw. It was a massive fox, standing taller than even the Hokage Tower, the tallest structure in Konoha. It had a surprisingly human body shape and was colored a vibrant orange. This wasn't what drew Naruto's attention, however. No, the small child was captivated by what was behind the massive fox. 9 tails, as orange as their owner and the biggest things Naruto had ever seen in his short life, were trashing about, creating whipping winds as they swung around, and creating tremors when they struck the walls, ground, or the golden bars. "KKQB. Naruto whispered, horrified to himself. The trashing fox immediately stilled, its enormous red eyes snapping to the young ninja. Slowly the enormous grin returned, and the fox settled down, resting its head, larger than Naruto's apartment, on its human-shaped forearms. "So, you at least know who I am. Good. Every jailer, no matter how pitiful, should know who their prisoner is." The beast rumbled, apparently satisfied with the terrified reaction it had gotten out of Naruto, simply by showing his form. Naruto's overwhelmed mind reacted to the first part of what the massive fox had said, not really registering the second part. "You are the Kyuubi. You attacked Konoha!" Naruto shouted, terror making place for hate against the reason for one of the greatest tragedies to have struck his beloved village. And possibly the reason he now had no parents. Naruto ignored the thought and glared at the massive fox, though he made sure to keep his distance. Which was a good thing, as Kyuubi slammed against the bars again. "I did not do so under my own control, but rest assured, once I get free from this prison I will finish what that damned Uchiha started," the 9 tails roared. Naruto frowned in confusion. He didn't expect such an answer when he had accused the monster. "What? What do you mean? You tried to destroy Konoha, didn't you?" Naruto asked, his mind not really capable of keeping up after the multitude of shocks it had gone through this day. The Kyuubi snorted. "Yes, I did, and I would do so again in a heartbeat. It deserves nothing less after what it has done to me," the being responded with hate lacing his voice. Before Naruto could jump to the defense of his village and plead that they did not, in fact, deserve total annihilation, the Kyuubi continued. "However, the attack of 6 years ago, I did not do it of my own will." The great beast chuckled darkly. "Though I guess that's not entirely true. I certainly wanted to destroy your pitiful village. However, someone else controlled me." Naruto was floored, before closing his mouth with a snap. He pointed at the great fox with an angry glare. "You're lying. You're just trying to blame someone else for it." Naruto should know. He had often tried to do the same himself, whenever he was caught during a prank, though he never seemed to get away with it. The monstrous fox immediately slammed into the bars again, sending Naruto staggering at the impact. You dare question my word. I am the great Kyuubi no Kitsune. I am the mightiest of all tailed beasts, the most powerful creation of our father. My tails flatten mountains and rise tsunamis. What use do I have for falsehoods and lies?" The being raged, fixing Naruto with a hateful stare. "Listen closely, small one. I may trick you. I may deceive you. I am a kitsune after all and the most powerful in existence at that. However, I do not lie. The Kyuubi bit out, lowering its head so it could look Naruto straight in the eye. Naruto blinked, before looking at the beast in confusion, his mind too tired to continue being terrified. Why not? It's not like I could tell, right? Naruto asked innocently. Surprised, the Kyuubi looked down at the small child, who was looking back at him without fear, just curiosity. It sighed before laying its head on its forearms again, staring over Naruto's head into the distance, with an expression Naruto couldn't place. Because my father raised me better than that, the fox said wistfully. Dynamic entry. The windows to Naruto's room shattered as a green-clad man crashed through them. He had obviously intended to land on his feet, but instead found himself pushed into a wall, with the blade of a tanto inches from his face. Salamander, you may release Gaikun now. Apologies, Hokage-sama. Apology accepted, Salamander, no harm done. Guy's body disagreed and the odd man absently wondered why he wasn't getting an apology, despite becoming far more intimately familiar with the inside of a hospital wall than he had ever intended to be. As if reading his thoughts, and since Guy was friends with numerous Yamanaka, he knew this to be a possibility, the aged voice of the Hokage spoke up. Perhaps, Gaikun, the next time you enter a hospital room with a high-strung ANBU commander and the Hokage, you should enter through the door. Hi Hokage-sama. Thank you for your youthful advice, groaned Guy. You're welcome, Gaikun, you're welcome, the third said graciously. Having extracted himself from the wall, Might Guy, Jounin and Taijutsu expert, stood at attention in front of his leader. You called for me, Hokage-sama? The man said in a serious tone of voice, any previous levity forgotten now that he was receiving his orders. Indeed I did, Gaikun. I have need of your Taijutsu expertise. The third nodded. I am at your command, Hokage-sama, Guy said gravely. The third Hokage nodded once more, before mentioning for Salamander. The ANBU handed Guy a thick stack of papers, with classified in bold red letters stamped on the front. Guy quickly looked through them, before glancing at the Hokage with a confused expression. Medical files? I thought you requested my Taijutsu expertise, Hokage-sama? The green-clad Jounin asked, even as he began reading the files more in depth. They are related, I assure you, Gaikun. As you probably know, someone used unusually large amounts of chakra in the vicinity of the training fields of the academy, the Hokage answered. Seeing Guy's affirmative nod, the aged shinobi continued. This individual has endured significant physical trauma as a result. I myself was present to witness the technique and its aftermath. At this, Guy looked up from the files. Aftermath? The Hokage nodded. A small portion of the forest surrounding the academy was completely flattened. Shock was clearly visibly on Guy's face. Such a devastating technique, and in the vicinity of the academy no less. The Hokage inclined his head in agreement. Indeed, luckily the academy had already finished for the day, so nobody was hurt. Except for him. Seeing the Hokage point to somewhere behind him, Guy turned around to look at the hospital bed. He had noticed the bed, of course, he was a Jounin after all, but the tackle of the ANBU had not allowed to note much more. Now he finally saw the occupant of the bed. Uzumaki-san? Guy asked, surprised. Both Naruto's constitution as well as his stamina were already known amongst the shinobi forces. So to see the child lying asleep on the bed, extensively covered in bandages, was surprising. Indeed. He was the person who drew upon the large amounts of chakra you have felt, and used it to destroy part of the forest. The professor said as he walked up to the bed, standing next to Guy. What kind of technique can a 6-year-old use that would cause such destruction? Guy muttered to himself, but his leader had heard him. It wasn't a technique. Guy turned to the third in surprise, seeing a smirk dance across the wizened face of the aged ninja. It was a punch. Guy's notorious eyebrows reached up to touch the edge of his equally infamous bowl cut. I can see why you asked for me then, Hokage-sama. Yes, I thought you would. Well, I have good and bad news for you, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen closed his eyes, trying to stave off the headache he could feel coming on. Naruto, I love you like one of my own, but I swear upon Kami's wrinkly nutsack that you have caused the majority of all the headaches I have ever had in my entire life. And I'm a veteran of 3 world wars, the old leader thought grouchily to himself, before opening his eyes and motioning for Guy to continue. First, the good news, please. Very well, Hokage-sama. The good news is that, based on your eyewitness account and the information in these medical files as well as my own investigation, I have come to the conclusion that Naruto-kun did not use the celestial gates in order to fuel his punch. Hiruzen internally sighed in relief. The opening of the gates were perilous at best even for the most skilled of shinobi. There was a reason Guy was both known and feared across the elemental nations. For a child to mess around with them, the damage could have been horrendous. What Naruto did it is more akin to the famous strength technique used by Tsunade-sama instead of the celestial gates. However, instead of immense control released at the most opportune moments during strikes to gain enormous strength, Naruto-kun used immense amounts of power to flood his body, overcoming the physical limitations of his body in much the same way most shinobi do when strengthening their bodies, but to a more extreme degree. Hiruzen turned around to face Guy, a thoughtful frown on his face. That sounds remarkably like the technique of the celestial gates to me, Guy-kun. Guy nodded. A common misconception, Hokage-sama, since it certainly appears so to the observer. However, the celestial gates work in a different way to what Naruto-kun did. When one uses the celestial gates, they release the limits our own body has put upon itself in order to function at a much higher degree. However, this is still the inherent physical strength of the body, not a chakra augmentation. It merely appears so, due to the release of one of the gates, and the subsequent flood of chakra. It is why intense physical training is required in order to use the gates effectively, Hokage-sama. 100 times 0 remains 0. Hiruzen nodded in understanding, his opinion of the odd jounin somewhat rising after finding out the reason for the man's ridiculous physical regime. However, what Naruto-kun did was not removing the limits his body has put on itself, but bypassing them with chakra. The result is the same, a body without its usual limits. However, this brings me to the bad news, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen closed his eyes again, as he felt icy tendrils spreading from his gut. He had a feeling he already knew what Guy was about to say. Because the result is similar, the consequences to Naruto's body are as well. The damage he has suffered is similar to the opening of the second or third gate, Hokage-sama. This is disregarding the state of his arm, Guy said in a mournful voice. The damage is truly that high. How? Hiruzen asked himself as he rubbed a hand against his aching forehead. Guy had heard him though and explained. I think it's because of two reasons, Hokage-sama. The first is that Naruto, for however a short amount of time, operated on a level far surpassing the limits of his body while those limits were still in effect. On top of that is his young age and the fact that his body is unaccustomed against such immense stress. Hiruzen gave a shaky sigh, before asking Guy the final, most important question. Will he recover? Silence was his answer, as Guy was deep in thought. The jounin obviously wanted to give his leader a positive answer, without instilling any false hope. Guy quickly gave up with a sigh though, before fixing Hiruzen with a mournful look. Had he been older, then yes. Even had he been but a mere fresh genin, due to his Uzumaki blood and his tenant, he would have eventually recovered. Had he been a chunin or jounin, he would have even eventually come out of this all the stronger for it. But now, with such a young, underdeveloped body, I am sorry, Hokage-sama, I truly am, but I fear Naruto-kun's growth may forever be stunted. Hiruzen turned away from his jounin in order to gaze at Naruto's sleeping form. He felt his heart break for the small child. The stunted growth, along with the terrible damage to the boy's right arm, would make becoming a shinobi, let alone Hokage, nothing more than a dream for the energetic blonde. Thank you, Guy. You may lo. Hiruzen was cut off when a dark, vile chakra began to cloud to room. And it originated from Naruto. A few minutes previously. Naruto's face was scrunched up in thought as his bright blue eyes stared ahead of him. Two blood-red eyes stared balefully back. Finally the silence became too much, and the Kyuubi snapped. Well? Out with it then, mortal! Your incessant staring is getting on my nerves. The mighty fox snapped irritably. Naruto blinked a few times in surprise, having lost most of his fear for the giant demon after getting bored out of his mind exploring the extremely impressive, yet ultimately very boring, room the two were stuck in. Where are we? Two giant eyes were fixed incredulously on the small ninja in training. We have been here for many hours, yet you only think to ask that question now? The fox snorted disdainfully. Not to be outdone, Naruto snorted as well, though not as impressively as the Kyuubi, since his snort didn't create a gale of wind. You aren't the most friendly-looking fox around, you know? The blonde defended himself. The Kyuubi rolled his eyes, before answering the small child's question, hoping it would keep Naruto from staring at it unblinkingly. Seriously. It was starting to get creepy. We are inside the seal that keeps me contained within you. Ah, Naruto nodded seriously, stroking his chin in a wide manner. The QB sighed in relief. Hopefully the child would now. That doesn't tell me anything, Databeo. What the hell is a seal? And what do you mean inside me, huh? Wait, Naruto cut himself off, frantically patting down his own body. How does that even fit? Silence, you fool. Naruto's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. Giving a relieved sigh, the QB continued. Perhaps I misspoke. We are not inside you. Not in the literal sense anyway. How to put this in a way even you understand? The great beast mused, ignoring Naruto's spluttering, who once again had the feeling he was being insulted, yet not really understanding how. Well, when I was defeated, I was locked away in a special prison. The prison itself does not exist in your world, little one. Think of your world as a room with doors. We are currently not in the room but behind one of the doors. The seal which I mentioned is what allows you to come here. And what allows my chakra into you, but you don't need to know that. Naruto's face scrunched up in thought, before giving a tentative nod. Satisfied, the QB continued. Now when I said that I was contained within you, I meant that the door is in your hands. You are the one that closes and opens it. And one day, you will open it completely and I will be free. Naruto was silent for a few moments, for which the fox was thankful, before giving a decisive nod. Weird, but I get it. But why are we here? The young Uzumaki asked. The QB growled in displeasure. I am here because of the arrogance of you pitiful humans. Because of those damned Uchiha and their thrice damned cursed eyes. For close to a century, I have been sealed away, to never see the light of day, to never feel the wind or rain on my face again. Why am I here? The fox spat. The QB leaned forward, his nose almost pressing against the golden bars keeping him from devouring Naruto. I can tell you that it is not by own will at least. And that I have deserved none of the years spent in here. The beast growled, malice dripping from every word. Naruto gulped, before marshalling his courage and frowned. You've been locked up for a century? That's pretty bad. And it's even worse because you don't deserve it. Naruto thought, not seeing the QB smirk malevolently. Before the creature could open his mouth in order to use Naruto's empathy in order to trick the child into releasing him, Naruto spoke again. You just wait, Foxy-san. When I get out of here I'll tell what you told me to the old man, he'll be able to help you. He's the Hokage, he can do anything, Databeo. Young Naruto said, giving the fox a thumbs up and a massive grin. The QB was stunned. This was not what he had expected. Naruto didn't notice though, as he looked confusedly around the room he had spent a few hours exploring. About that. How do I get out of here? Why am I here in the first place? Had the QB been a lesser being, he would have face-palmed, dignity be damned. As it was, the great Kitsune simply sighed before answering. The reason why you are here is the same as why you cannot leave this place. Not yet at least. Why not? Look at your arm, small one. Naruto looked at his unblemished arm, not understanding what the QB was getting at. Looks fine to me. I should hope so. This is the representation of your mind. Should it be damaged, well then I'd be worried if I were you. Now look in your reflection. Looking down at his feet which were submerged within the water flooding the room, Naruto checked out his reflection. I don't see any Choi. Naruto shouted suddenly. His reflection looked back at him, covered in small burns and cuts, and his right arm. He hurriedly felt his arm and was reassured when he felt smooth, slightly damp skin. Still, the reflection bothered him. What? Your little experiment had some negative consequences. What you see in the reflection is the current state of your body. You will eventually heal, though the damage done to your body will preventing you from ever becoming a proper ninja. The QB intoned, each word heavy as the fall of a hammer. Naruto sank to his knees, looking horrified at his mangled reflection. No, he whispered fearfully to himself. Unless. Naruto's head whipped back up with such speed, it made his golden hair shake back and forth. Unless? The blonde asked hopefully. Unless you draw upon my chakra in order to heal yourself. My chakra is far more potent than yours, and while poisonous to regular humans, because you are my jailer, you will only benefit of it. Naruto jumped to his feet, ready to accept the demon's offer then and there, before a small whisper in the back of his mind held him back. Wait, why would you help me? What do you get out of this? Naruto asked wearily. Why the sudden suspiciousness, little one? The Kyuubi asked lazily. Well, you did say you were gonna deceive me. Right? A dark chuckle was his answer. My, it learns. Naruto didn't relax his guarded stance, not rising to the taunt. The Kyuubi rolled his eyes before answering. Because I want to go to sleep, and you are giving me a headache. Bullshit. Naruto said harshly, surprising the fox with his crude language. Then again, an orphan living on the streets was bound to pick up on a few more unsavory things here and there. I do not lie, remember? The Kyuubi grinned, enjoying the way Naruto's face became an interesting shade of red. Heading of the tirade that was sure to come, the demon continued. There is also the issue of you dying. That shut Naruto up immediately. Me? Dying? The Kyuubi hummed in a bored manner. This seal is different from the others that have held me prisoner. In this case, should your soul depart the plane of the living, then it would drag mine along with it. No reformation or rebirth for me, but true death, just like your pitiful race is doomed to. It's distasteful, the Kyuubi said with an irritated snarl. That doesn't really explain why you're helping me, Foxy-san, Naruto said hesitantly. Ignoring the ridiculous nickname, for now, the Kyuubi explained. The stronger a ninja you are, the greater the chances of your survival, and thus my own as well. There's also the fact that you need to have a body that won't die when I try to free myself, or I'll die as well. You can't have the strength I require of you if you remain a mere civilian. Naruto frowned before nodding. Right. Then I'll accept your help, Foxy-san. What do I need to do? Well, first you need to. The Kyuubi trailed off as one of his 9 massive tails wormed itself with great difficulty through the bars, the tip ending not far from Naruto's chest. The small blonde was getting nervous, but did his utmost in order to not let it show. Leave! The tip of the tail slammed into Naruto with enormous force, launching the screaming blonde into the darkness of the hallway. The moment Hiruzen felt the dark chakra burst from Naruto's body, he jumped back, closer to the windows of the room, automatically positioning himself in an easier position to escape. Even though he was nearing the ripe old age of 70, an unusually high age for a shinobi indeed, his reflexes were still as sharp as ever. He saw that Gaikun had created some distance himself as well, falling into a taijutsu stance that Hiruzen only vaguely recognized, though he had no doubt that in the hands of a specialist like Gaikun, it would be dangerous nonetheless. Next to him, Salamander had fallen into a guarded stance as well, his tanto held out in front of his chest, a single hand resting on a hand seal, ready to unleash a myriad of jutsu at a moment's notice. The actions of these 3 elite ninja might have seemed like overreacting, however, you would be hard-pressed to find a single Konoha ninja over 6 years old that wouldn't act the same way. After all, the moment they had felt the chakra, the 3 ninja had recognized it immediately. One does not so easily forget the chakra of a demon of the Kyuubi's caliber after all. Hidden beneath the wide sleeves of his ceremonial robes, Hiruzen had formed the hand seals needed for the summoning of his friend and battle partner Inma, the Monkey King. He refrained from activating the technique though, not willing to call out the powerful summon if it turned out it was unnecessary. By Kami above, I hope it is unnecessary. The oppressive chakra began to cover Naruto's body in a bubbling red shroud, while increasing its vile presence in the rest of the room. Hiruzen heard Gaikun's breathing hitch for a second, though outwardly the taijutsu specialist managed to keep an impressively unruffled appearance. Salamander though didn't even so much as twitch as the dark chakra pressed down on them. As expected of his ANBU commander, of course. Hokage-sama? Gaikun asked, voice not yet nervous, but steadily getting there as more and more chakra began to envelop Naruto, its corrupting nature visible in the way it ate away at the linens covering the boy. Hokage-sama? Gaikun asked again, more urgently this time. No! We wait! Hiruzen replied in a harsh tone, eyes fixated on Naruto's right arm, which was steadily becoming more and more visible, as the Kyuubi's chakra began to eat away at the bandages covering it. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, what is it that we're waiting for? Salamander asked, his nervousness only betrayed by the tenseness of his voice. Slowly, Hiruzen let out a smirk. Look at Naruto-kun's arm, Salamander, Gaikun. Both ninja wearily approached the small child on the hospital bed, who was still leaking massive amounts of demonic chakra, even though the amount slowly started to die off. When they finally reached the foot end of Naruto's bed, Hiruzen's hearing managed to pick up Salamander's quieto. Gaikun's reaction didn't require any superb hearing though. Yash! How can this be? Hokage-sama, truly your fountain of youth is fanned by the most impressive of youthful flames. How did you know that this would happen? The eccentric Jounin bellowed enthusiastically, before turning towards Hiruzen with a thumbs up and a grin which literally sparkled. Hiruzen blinked at the light glinting of his taijutsu expert's teeth. That is some impressive genjutsu. That, or he is the most vigorous teeth brusher in the history of man. Shaking of the random thought, Hiruzen focused on Gaikuin and Salamander, who had turned to look at his leader out well. The aged Hokage walked towards Naruto's bed until he was standing in between the other two ninja. By now, the Kyuubi's chakra had almost completely disappeared, reduced to a thin film surrounding Naruto's skin. Now that he was standing closer to the blonde boy, Hiruzen could see that the 3 whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks had thickened considerably, while his fingers had developed claws. When the Hokage squinted, he could even see 2 fangs peeking out from under the child's upper lip. He looked at Naruto's arm with a smile on his face. I am called the professor for a reason, you know, Hiruzen said smugly, eyes not leaving his surrogate grandson's arm. Surrounded by vile and demonic chakra, wrapped in smoking bandages that had almost been eaten away, Naruto's arm was visible to the world. And it had been healed. Naruto came back to the world in stages. First came sound. The small child could hear several voices somewhere above and to the side of him. He couldn't really make out what was being said, but the voices all spoke in serious tones. Then came touch. Naruto could feel a coarse fabric on his torso, while something soft was lying underneath his head. A pillow? He could feel that the fabric surrounding him had been damaged in large areas, as if it had been burned, making it feel uncomfortable against his skin. He could also feel several thin strips of fabric pressed closely to his body, though most felt even more damaged than the other fabrics. Bandages? Next, almost simultaneously, taste and smell came back to him. His mouth felt as if someone had attempted to shove the desert of Suna down his throat, and his nose picked up an acrid smell, like something vile had been burned away. Then finally his vision returned to him, blurry at first. Above him, he could vaguely make out what appeared to be a light bulb. Naruto turned his head to his side, trying to take in the space he was in. It appeared to be a room of some kind, though he didn't recognize it. Then again, at this point the world simply consisted of black and gray blobs. For all he knew, he was just lying in his own bed. Probably not. This pillow is way too nice for that. Naruto let out a groan, something he regretted immediately when it felt like crushed glass tried to work its way back up his throat. Suddenly a large, gray blob was at his side, pressing something cool in his hands. Drink, Naruto. You're pretty dried up right now. A kind, elderly voice said gently. GG, Naruto thought tiredly, but he couldn't act on his thought, as clear water was brought to his lips. Drinking greedily, relishing the soothing feeling the liquid had on his sore throat, the blonde child emptied the glass within seconds. Naruto let out another pitiful groan. His throat had stopped aching, but he was still incredibly thirsty. A chuckling was his answer, as the gray blob took away Naruto's empty glass, only to almost immediately replace it with a full one, which the boy accepted without hesitation. Careful, Naruto. If you drink too fast, you'll just throw it up. Naruto grimaced, but complied. His throat still hurt a little and he had no intention of making it worse. Do you remember what happened, Naruto? Naruto paused his drinking, peering at the gray blob, his vision by now cleared enough to identify it as being indeed the Hokage. I remember the tree and light and a lot of pain. Naruto croaked out, his memory slowly reassembling itself. Old man Hokage hummed in thought, stroking the small beard on his chin. Indeed. That is 2 days ago now, Naruto. Do you remember what happened afterwards? Do you remember how you came to be here? The third continued, fixing Naruto with a heavy stare. Naruto looked around the room, trying to find out where exactly here was. He didn't recognize the room itself, but he recognized it as belonging to Konoha's General Hospital. Looking back at his Gigi, Naruto shook his head. The old man hummed again, before speaking up in his gravelly voice. When you called on your chakra and punched that tree, Naruto, you destroyed a large part of the forest. Naruto's eyes lit up, an enormous grin stretching across his face. Wow. Really? The third lifted an imperious eyebrow as he leveled a flat stare at the child. Oh. I mean, oh no. That's horrible. Naruto tried, giving his old man his most innocent look. The Hokage simply snorted in amusement, before turning a little in order to face Naruto better. The child could tell that the mood had turned serious, and wiped his faux expression off his face, giving his Gigi his undivided attention. The old man looked very grave and serious as he looked Naruto straight in his eyes. By calling on so much of your chakra, and using it in such an unguarded manner, you really damaged your body, Naruto. You were seriously hurt. There was a very real possibility that you could never become a ninja because of it, the Hokage said in a pained voice, worry clear on his face. Naruto winced. He still remembered the way he had looked in his reflection when he had been inside the seal. He had freaked out when he had seen the damage. He could easily imagine that his precious people had been even worse off. I'm sorry, Gigi. I won't do it again, Naruto said remorsefully. And he meant it. He had felt so incredibly strong when he had called upon his chakra, and the old man had just confirmed that his technique had been incredibly powerful. If he could train it, he would become Hokage in no time, Databeo. But even then, if such a technique would hurt his precious people, then he wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. He cared more about them than the hat. It was just his ninja way. Despite not being a ninja yet, but that was neither here nor there. He was surprised when he heard the old man chuckling. He had expected a stern talking to, maybe a punishment of some sort, who knows, maybe even a tear-filled request to never do something stupid like that again. There had definitely not been any humorous chuckling involved in the young child's imagination. Naruto-kun, it warms my heart to see you deny the lure of power so easily, in favor of your precious people. No matter what the villagers may tell you, you Naruto carry with you the will of fire, the old man said, glowing pride almost visible in his voice, as he leaned forward to ruffle Naruto's golden hair. Naruto looked down at his knees, trying to hide the tears that had sprung up in his eyes. For a shunned child like him, such proud words were more precious than all the money in the world. However, as he looked down, he saw his arm. Or more importantly, his healed arm. Lifting it in front of his face, Naruto couldn't contain a small whoa of amazement. Again the third Hokage chuckled and opened his mouth to say something. He was cut off, however, when Naruto chuckled as well. Guess the damned fox came through, after all, Naruto said in amazement. His attention was so intensely focused on his newly healed arm, he failed to see the third Hokage tense up, a harsh look flashing across his face. For that matter, Naruto had yet to notice the presence of Konoha beautiful green beast in the room, who, like his Hokage, had immediately tensed up. It would be several years until Naruto would be skilled enough to even notice a hidden ANBU commander, let alone an ANBU commander ready to leap into battle at any second, or the minutest hints of danger. Completely oblivious to the commotion and well-concealed terror he had just caused, Naruto frowned. Maybe the fox was telling the truth about not lying after all, the young child murmured to himself, unaware of the intense looks this gathered from the present ninja. The fox, Naruto? The old man spoke up sternly. Naruto perked up. He had been both scared and tired when he had woken up in the seal and met the Kyuubi, and because of that he hadn't completely understood everything the giant fox had told him. However, his Gigi was super smart. He would probably know what the demon was up to. He was the Hokage after all, he knew everything about everything. Turning to one of his most precious people, Naruto started babbling. Yeah, Gigi. After I punched that tree and everything went black, I woke up. But I didn't wake up here, I woke up in some giant room. And on one end of the room there were these really big golden bars, but I didn't know what they were for, until the fox started talking from behind the bars. Of course I didn't know it was the fox then, I just saw his eyes and his teeth. Did you know that the fox had really big eyes and teeth, Gigi? Like really, really, really big. But I wasn't scared at all. He started talking, but I didn't like what he said, so I went up to him and I said to him, Naruto. The excitable blonde snapped his mouth shut with an audible click, a blush covering his face as he abashedly rubbed the nape of his neck. Sorry, Gigi, I guess I got carried away there, huh? He saw his old man peering at him intensely, looking unusually stern, making Naruto feel uncomfortable. This continued for several moments, until Naruto's back became drenched in sweat. Then the Hokage smiled a gentle smile, and the aura of tension that had filled the room disappeared almost completely. No matter, Naruto, no matter, I am just pleased that you remain your boisterous self, the Hokage said warmly. Naruto nodded, despite not really understanding what his old man meant by that. However, had he been in possession of more powerful observational skills, then he would have noticed both Might Guy and the ANBU Commander Salamander relax noticeably, something in their Hokage's wording putting them at ease. Try to begin at the start, Naruto, from the moment you woke up in the large room, until the moment you woke up here. And a little slower this time, perhaps? The third suggested gently, a smile still on his face. Naruto nodded and started talking. The Hokage didn't interrupt him once, though Naruto could tell the aged ninja was taken by surprise several times during his tale. It took the better part of an hour before Naruto was finished with his story, during which the Hokage kept silently handing him glasses of water. Now he was sitting upright in bed, sipping his 7th glass of water, his eyes going back and forth from the Hokage to a weirdly dressed man with truly humongous eyebrows. He had noticed the man's presence while he had been talking about his experience in the seal, which had caused him to almost vault out of the bed and through the nearest window. Seriously. Ninja were ridiculously silent when they wished to be. He was brought out of his musing when the old man cleared his throat. Naruto turned to the Hokage, preparing himself for any questions the aged ninja would probably have for him. After a few seconds spent in thoughtful silence, the third started asking his questions. So, you are positive that the Kyuubi said that an Uchiha was responsible for the attack 6 years ago? The old man asked. Naruto furrowed his brow. If you mean if I'm sure or not, then yeah. He did say that. He was rather angry about it too. He kept cursing the Uchiha and their eyes. Kinda weird. I mean, yeah, most of them are jerks, but I don't get why he kept on cursing their eyes and not the rest of them. Naruto nodded firmly, not seeing the Hokage's lip twitch in amusement. A discussion for another day, perhaps. Naruto, do you think that the Kyuubi was telling the truth when he told you that he didn't lie? The old man continued, gray eyes boring in Naruto's blue ones. Naruto thought long and hard about this, absent-mindedly stroking his newly healed arm. Finally, he gave a tentative nod. I think so. Whatever he says probably won't be the entire truth, but at least it won't be a lie, Naruto said, managing to keep any hesitation out of his voice. The old man simply hummed again and descended into deep thought. It was obvious his Jiji was thinking very hard about something, so Naruto started to examine the room, while waiting for the Hokage to finish thinking. His eyes eventually landed on the green-clad ninja with the weird eyebrows. Seeing that Naruto's eyes were focused on him, the weird ninja grinned, before giving Naruto a thumb up, the light glinting of the man's teeth. Naruto hurriedly looked straight ahead, hoping his Jiji would be finished with thinking soon. As if the old man had heard his thoughts, who knew, maybe he did. They were ninja after all, there was probably a jutsu for that or something. The aged ninja shook himself before clearing his throat. In that case, Naruto, please inform the Kyuubi that I will try to look into the matter. However, that being said, promise me that you will not try and meet with the demon, Naruto. While he may have decided not to lie to you, the Kyuubi is both old and wise, and it will probably try to trick you at every chance it gets. The third Hokage said seriously, fixing Naruto with a stare. Naruto quickly nodded. The seal had been very boring and the fox had been very scary, at first at least, and Naruto had no intention of going back anytime soon. Now we must decide what to do with you, Naruto. Oh, that doesn't sound good, the small child thought to himself, his troublemaker senses going haywire. We cannot send you back to the academy right now, Naruto. The Kyuubi's chakra has done an incredible job of healing the damage to your body, but it has still been put under incredible stress, both by your technique and the healing. On top of that, you suffer from mild chakra burns, which will make it impossible for you to work with your chakra for about a week, the Hokage said sadly. Naruto felt crushed. He needed the academy in order to train and become stronger, so that he could become Hokage. Especially now that he had promised his Jiji that he wouldn't try his new technique anymore. Instead, you will apprentice under Jounin Might Guy here. Gaikun is a famous taijutsu specialist, and he will oversee your recovery. You will train under him in order to strengthen your body and gain a better control over your chakra. Then maybe next time, you don't blow yourself up as well when you use your technique. The old man chuckled. Naruto gaped at his Jiji. Did you just really? The blonde yelled excitedly. Really? The Hokage chuckled. Your technique is truly impressive, Naruto. Keep this up, and train safely under a teacher, and I expect to give this hat to you in no time at all, the old man said with a smile on his face. Naruto catapulted himself from the bed, slamming into the Hokage's chest, giving a crushing hug and burying his face in the aged ninja's chest, hiding his tears from the world. The old man's booming laughter filled the small hospital room, making Guy smile as well as he looked at the scene. You better prepare to give up the hat real soon, old man. I'm gonna be Hokage before you know it, Databeo. The professor laughed again, ruffling his surrogate grandson's hair. I will hold you that, Naruto. Now you better hurry along. Gaikun is waiting for you, go with him, get to know each other. He will tell you what you're going to do for the rest of this year. Once he deems you ready, you can go back to the academy," the aged Hokage said warmly, gently untangling the young child from his robes. "Sure thing, Gigi. Come on, let's go Bushibrao-sensei," Naruto yelled excitedly, jumping from his Gigi's lap and sprinting towards the door of his hospital room, leaving a bemused Might Guy in his wake. Naruto paused, however, when he put his hand on the doorknob. He hadn't really considered it yet, due to being overwhelmed at the time, but now he recalled that the Kyuubi had said that he had been sealed inside of him. A demon was inside his body, maybe not in the literal sense, but the connection was still there. Biting his lip in uncertainty, the blonde turned back towards the Hokage, fear filling his eyes. "Gigi, the villagers, were they right? When they called me demon?" The elderly Hokage gave a deep sigh, before coming to his feet and walking towards Naruto. Bending down to one knee, so he could look the small boy in the eye, the professor gave Naruto his most reassuring smile. "Naruto, you are no demon. You have seen the Kyuubi, it is your prisoner, but it is not you. You are simply the jail that keeps us safe every single day. You're not a demon, Naruto, you are a hero," the Hokage said firmly. Naruto felt like an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulder, or like a shroud of darkness that he hadn't realized had been there had been removed. He felt lighter and happier than he could remember ever being in his entire short life. "Thanks, Gigi," Naruto whispered, furiously wiping at his eyes. "Anytime, Naruto. Anytime," the Hokage said, his smile wrinkling the skin around his eyes and mouth. "Now off you go," the old man said, opening the door and gently pushing Naruto through it. Naruto nodded before giving a grin that could rival the sun in intensity. Maybe even rival that of Might Guy's. Maybe. "Let's go Bushibrao-sensei," Naruto yelled, before dashing down the hallway, laughter and angry reprimands following in his wake. The Hokage turned to his taijutsu specialist, amusement dancing in his eyes. "I believe you are being called Gaikun." Konoha's beautiful green beast blinked a few times in bewilderment, before giving a loud laugh and dashing after the blonde blur. "YOSH. I see that your flames are already impressively fanned, my youthful student. Together, we shall fan those flames so that your fountain of youth may be everlasting. YOSH." Hiruzen was still chuckling as he slowly walked towards his own residence, not far from the Konoha hospital. As he was walking, a shadow disconnected itself from the ceiling and dropped down behind him. It straightened up, revealing itself to be the ANBU Commander Salamander. The commander drew level with Hiruzen and they continued walking in silence towards the Hokage's home. While outwardly the commander appeared unreadable, Hiruzen could tell that the ninja desperately wanted to ask some questions. He wasn't disappointed. "Hokage-sama, what do you wish to do with the information Uzumaki has provided us?" Hiruzen didn't answer for a moment, his eyes clouded in thought. "What makes you think I will do anything at all with the information, Salamander? It was given by the Kyuubi no Kitsune after all, not the most truthful intelligence source, I think you'll agree," Hiruzen mumbled in his gravelly voice. Another silence fell as the ANBU commander thought about this. Uzumaki was of the opinion that the Kyuubi was being truthful when it swore it would speak no lies. Hiruzen smiled, as he fished his pipe from somewhere underneath his robes, lighting it with a simple katan equals fire, jutsu. "And you trust young Naruto's judgment in this?" "Perhaps. Maybe it would be wise to ask Yamanaka to accompany Uzumaki in a trip to the demon, so we may get a less impressionable interpretation of the Kyuubi's words." Hiruzen shook his head, puffing away on his pipe. "I'm afraid that is simply too dangerous, Salamander. Naruto didn't meet the Kyuubi in his own mindscape, but instead sent his mental projection to the dimension the seal has created. A Yamanaka could technically hitch a ride when Naruto's projection travels from his mind to the seal, but there's no guarantee of the Yamanaka being able to leave again. Powerful in the mind arts they may be, dimension travelers they are not." Hiruzen intoned gravely, already having thought of this long and hard. "I see," Salamander said curtly, before falling silent. "In that case we have no other option but to trust Uzumaki's instinct. Regardless whether the demon was being truthful or not, the information provided is too grave to not look into, Hokage-sama, no matter the source," the commander continued. Hiruzen sighed, blowing out a large cloud of smoke. "I agree, Salamander. As this information is now only shared between you, me and Gaikun, I ask that you investigate this matter personally. Delegate all your other duties which not require immediate attention to those you see fit to handle them, then focus all of your efforts on unraveling the truth behind the demon's words. You will receive any manpower and security clearance you think you may need, Salamander." Hiruzen said softly, but firmly, hoping that he wasn't making a monumental decision. Hi Hokage-sama, Salamander said crisply, snapping off a salute, even as they were still walking. Hiruzen nodded in acknowledgement, before continuing on. He was surprised to find that Salamander remained at his side. Evidently, the ANBU commander had something to get off his chest. Hokage-sama, about Gaisen, Salamander began. If you are concerned about the fact that Gaikun is privy to this information as well, then do not worry. He has my full confidence, Hiruzen said reassuringly. It is not that, Hokage-sama. I know Gaisen is loyal to Konoha and smart enough to keep the intel to himself. Rather, the ANBU commander trailed off. Hiruzen widened his eyes in surprise. It was not often an ANBU, let alone their commander, couldn't find the words to say something. Speak, Salamander. I feel that troubled times are ahead of us, and I'd like for there to be no secrets between the two of us, Hiruzen said invitingly, encouraging his commander to speak his mind. Hokage-sama, forgive me, but is it wise to pair those two together? Hiruzen stopped walking and turned to his ANBU commander, his face set in a disapproving frown. We have already discussed this, Salamander. At length, I might add. Gaikun is a world-renowned expert on the celestial gates, and as such is the ideal person to train Naruto, so that he may avoid being so injured in the future. Or perhaps you just happen to have such an expert hiding amongst my ANBU forces? If so, let him come forth. I'll gladly evaluate his worth against that of Gaikun, Hiruzen said sternly, his voice brooking no argument. Salamander immediately bowed his head, realizing he was testing his Hokage's patience. I understand, Hokage-sama. Forgive me. Hiruzen let his expression soften, even as began walking again. He could hear Salamander's footsteps, after a slight hesitation, fall in line with his again. Despite his appearance and personality, Might Guy is one of our most accomplished jounin, Salamander. His will of fire burns as one of the brightest amongst the Konoha ninja, and his loyalty is absolute. Have no fear, I expect great things from Naruto under that man's guidance, Hiruzen said, his tone assured and fond. As they continued walking, the aged Sarutobi glanced towards the mountain wall lining one edge of the village. Or more importantly, he looked at the faces hewn out of the rock, staring imperiously out over their village. His gaze lingered on the final head, to the right of his own. Great things indeed. Naruto couldn't help but grin. In fact, he hadn't stopped grinning from the moment Gigi had given him permission to train his new technique. He had even assigned him a teacher. Sure, Bushy-Brow Sensei was more than just a little weird, what with his massive eyebrows and his weird hair. And while Naruto could admire the man's dedication to a single color, Naruto was still trying to scavenge an outfit that consisted solely of the color orange. He had to wonder about what the man had chosen to wear. A spandex jumpsuit? Really? Naruto shook his head, shaking of his musings about his teacher's wardrobe choices. He had more important matters to concern himself with after all. He was going to train. Actually train, not just mucking about by himself on some abandoned academy training ground, trying to replicate what the teachers had thought in class that day. Something that became noticeably more difficult when he didn't show up for class in the first place. But today would be different. He had been forced to wait for about a week after being discharged from the hospital in order to heal from his chakra burns and the lingering damage to his body, but today he had been finally cleared to start with training. Today, a teacher would help him train his technique, and teach him about chakra and strengthening his body and well, about other ninja stuff Naruto supposed. He hadn't been in the academy long enough, or often enough, for that matter, to really understand the full scope of what a ninja was capable of, and thus all the fields they needed to train in order to become proficient in them. Finally managing to control himself enough to stop bouncing in place, Naruto snapped to attention, trying to imitate the at-ease position that he saw other ninja fall into when around his Gigi. Focusing his attention, Naruto could tell by the man's amused smile he hadn't quite pulled it off. He wanted to scowl at the man's smile. Experience had skewed Naruto's perception of other people's expressions and social interactions, not helped by being so isolated himself. In Naruto's young and somewhat stunted mind, a smile was almost always an indication of derision or condescension. The only exceptions to this were his Gigi and the nice people at Ichiraku's, and he knew those people close enough to be able to tell the difference. He didn't know his impromptu sensei, though. Any suspicion from Naruto's side was waved off, though, when the man crinkled his eyes and gave a grin which literally sparkled. Bushy-Brow Sensei gave him a thumbs up, standing in a dramatic pose as he did so. YOSH, my youthful student. In the year that you will study under me, We shall endeavor to strengthen your body so that it can handle the inferno that is your truly youthful flames of chakra. If you study hard and work even harder, I have no doubt that you can use your youthful techniques safely by the end of the year. Naruto blinked a couple times at his new sensei, who was still standing in his weird pose, absent-mindedly rubbing his ear. Bushy-brow sensei had a set of lungs on him, if nothing else at least. Seeing that his sensei had dropped out of his pose, finally, and was now staring at him in anticipation, Naruto realized he had yet to answer the man's loud boast. Internally shrugging, Naruto decided to go for if you can't beat them, join them mentality, and snapped to attention, his left hand lifted to his temple. OSSU. YOSH. Unknown to both sensei and student, a few blocks away, a certain copycat ninja felt a chill shudder down his spine. The silver-haired ninja warily checked his surroundings from behind his orange book, but saw nothing immediately threatening around him. In fact, all seemed utterly peaceful and normal on this sunny day. Then why did I just have a sense of doom filling me? Sharingan no Kakashi thought to himself with another shudder. Now then, my youthful student, the first thing I wish for you to do is to repeat what you did before you unleashed your youthful attack. Bushy-brow sensei bellowed again, sparkling grin still on his face. Naruto managed to hide his wince at the man's boisterous volume, before fully registering what the odd man had just said. Raising his hand as if he were still in the classroom at the academy, Naruto waved it impatiently. His sensei appeared confused at the action at first, before giving an amused nod. Dropping his hand and again falling into an imitation of the at-ease form, Naruto spoke up as seriously as he could. But Bushy-brow sensei, isn't that dangerous? The last time I did that, I ended up in the hospital for 2 whole days. His sensei nodded a few times in contemplation, stroking his chin in a serious manner, adopting a thoughtful pose. Suddenly his hand whipped out at incredible speeds, finger pointing at Naruto, who let out an eep of surprise and fell over. Firstly, my youthful student, my name is not Bushy-brow sensei. Naruto worked himself to his feet, only to be bowled over again, as his sensei continued talking, now holding up a second finger. Secondly, my youthful student, you will not actually be performing the attack. I simply wish for you to do the same thing you did before you unleashed your flames of youth, and then hold it there. Naruto worked himself to his feet again, worry still clear on his face, but was startled out of his musings when he felt a large hand clamp down on his shoulder. Looking up, Naruto stared at the face of his sensei, who was now smiling without showing all of his teeth, his eyes crinkled in the same way his GGs would when the man was amused. Please do not worry yourself, Uzumaki-san. As long as you are my student, I swear that no undue harm shall befall you. You have my word for it. The odd man said in a comforting tone of voice, completely serious. Naruto felt himself reassured at the man's quiet words, and gave a determined nod. His sensei gave an approving one in return and took a few steps back, arms crossed in front of his chest. Whenever you are ready, Uzumaki-san, please proceed. Steeling himself, Naruto closed his eyes and spread his feet, falling in the same stance he had used when he had first connected with his chakra. Holding his hands up in the ram seal, used for the focusing of chakra, Naruto tried to recall what he had done about a week ago. He slowed his breathing easy enough, but once again, Naruto's mind couldn't empty itself properly. Though there were numerous people within Konoha that would claim this was because Naruto's mind was empty to begin with. Naruto disagreed. Naruto was acutely aware of his teacher watching him, and felt incredibly self-conscious. On top of that, his mind kept flashing back to the reflection of himself that he had seen when he had been inside the seal. Which was also a sense of turmoil for the small child. While it had been incredibly reassuring to hear his GG think of him like a hero instead of a demon, it didn't ease the sting from the insults of the other villagers. In fact, they only hurt even more now. Before, he had been able to reassure himself that the villagers had simply been mean and spiteful, their words only fueled by, and based on, hate. Apparently, they held at least a kernel of truth, no matter how ignorant of said truth the people were. All of this led to a very troubled child that simply couldn't get his mind to become clear and empty. His mounting frustration at his continued failures with the technique were certainly not helping in that regard. Right as he was about to give up, he heard the reassuring voice of his teacher, who was still speaking in his soft, gentle tone of voice. Feel free to take your time, Uzumaki-san. Connecting with your chakra is a very difficult task to accomplish, but the more you do it, the easier it will become. For now, clear your thoughts. If you find this to be difficult, then focus instead on something soothing, like your breathing. Taking his teacher's advice to heart, Naruto tried to stop letting his thoughts and doubts run rampant, firmly shoving them to the back of his mind, ignoring them for now. Instead, he focused on his breathing, trying to give it his entire attention. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And out. In. Out. And so it continued. Slowly, the various thoughts and doubts that had been gnawing at Naruto's consciousness started to fade away, his mind clearing. Then the outside world started to fall away, the rustling of the leaves, the feel of wind on his face, the gaze of his teacher on his form. In. Out. As the outside world ceased to exist, and his mind became empty of all thought, Naruto finally achieved the mental state required to interact with one's chakra. In. Out. Immediately he felt that something was different. The first time he had tried to connect to his chakra, he had fallen away from his own body, coming upon his chakra that appeared to him like a sun. When he had returned to his body, the light of his chakra had followed him, coursing wildly through the passageways in his body. And apparently it hadn't left. Instead of falling away from his body towards the light, Naruto felt its familiar warmth storm throughout his chakra system, a light that raced throughout his very being. Focusing on the torrents of chakra, Naruto felt a secondary source of light, sporadically entering his system, before being assimilated in his own chakra. The Kyuubi? It made sense in a way. Whereas Naruto's own chakra felt like a sun, bright and life-giving, the other chakra was like a different kind of sun, scorching and baleful. Matches his personality, at least. Naruto snorted mentally. He couldn't tell for certain, but he thought he got a faint sense of annoyance from the back of his mind. Ignoring it for now, Naruto focused again on his own light. He started to urge it to go faster through his veins, to draw more from the central core of light that shone from somewhere around his belly. Slowly, the amount of chakra coursing through his body started to increase, carefully at first, but growing wilder every second. Naruto didn't know it, but he was once again surrounded by a shroud of energy, swirling around him like a maelstrom, digging deep grooves in the ground. Thank you, Uzumaki-san, that's quite enough. Please try to keep it at this level. Suddenly came the voice of Bushibrow-sensei. I can draw on more, Naruto quickly said, not wanting to give a weak impression to his teacher. Really? Came the surprised reply. Naruto couldn't see it, but Might Guy had an impressed look on his face. The Jounin thought carefully for a moment, before shaking his head. While that is certainly impressive, it would be better to keep it to this level for now. You are after all only recently healed from severe chakra burns, and if you were to draw on more, it might impede with my own observations of how your technique works. Naruto was somewhat disappointed he couldn't really cut loose, but his teacher made sense. So he stopped drawing on more chakra and instead tried to keep the chakra he had called upon from returning to his core. Good, very good, Naruto-kun. Now please prepare to throw a punch like the one you had thrown when you first experimented with this technique, but do not throw the punch itself. If you feel as if you cannot contain it anymore, please try to simply let the chakra naturally recede. If this fails, please alert me, and I will make sure you do not injure yourself. Naruto was briefly apprehensive about preparing to throw a punch again. After all, the last one had left him in a pretty bad shape. He quickly shoved it to the side though. This time, he had a teacher to help him and keep him safe, so there was nothing to fear. On top of that, how was he ever going to become Hokage when he was too scared to even use his own techniques? A determined frown on his face, Naruto cocked back his fist, keeping it close to his body. He started to slowly guide the chakra running through his body to pool into his fist, slowly increasing the amount in a controlled manner. After all, teacher or no, a little caution never hurt anybody. Because he still had his eyes closed, Naruto didn't see the effect his efforts had on his clenched fist. Like before, it was encased in a swirling cloak of chakra, far denser than the one surrounding the rest of his body, appearing almost as a physical construct that obscured his fist in swirling blue. Guy, however, paying close attention to his student, did see the results of Naruto's efforts and barely contained a gasp. That is almost like the Force technique. Guy was shaken from his revelation by a grunt from Naruto. The boy had his face scrounged up in determination, his teeth clenched in the effort to contain his power. Sensei, I don't think I can control any more chakra. Naruto ground out between his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. Then do not call upon further amounts of chakra, Naruto. Simply try to maintain the amount you have now gathered in your fist. Remember, try not to throw a punch yet, and should you lose control, give me a warning. Naruto gave a curt nod, before starting to tone down the amount of chakra he had been pulling towards his fist. It proved to be more difficult than he had originally thought it would be. The chakra system circulated chakra throughout the body, much like the blood vessels do with blood. This meant that fully cutting off the flow of chakra to a specific part of the body was not only nearly impossible, it could have dire consequences. More importantly to Naruto, however, this meant that his chakra system kept circulating chakra towards his fist, where it was being added to the amount already gathered. He could feel his control slowly slip with each heartbeat. "Sensei! I can't control it anymore," Naruto yelled, panic slowly creeping into his voice. Gai-sensei remained calm though, his tone steady and controlled, calming Naruto down somewhat. "No need to worry, Naruto-kun. Simply try to let go of the chakra you have gathered, letting it flow naturally into the rest of your system." Giving a hurried nod, Naruto tried to take a deep breath, taking care to not let all of the gathered energy dissipate too fast. He had a feeling that would end badly. However, as he started to lose his hold on the chakra pooled into his fist, Naruto encountered a significant problem. The chakra wouldn't leave. Instead, the more Naruto loosened his hold on it, the wilder it became, making containing it increasingly difficult. On the outside, this manifested itself in a destabilizing of the whirlpool of blue surrounding Naruto's fist. Might Guy took notice of this with a worried frown. "Sensei?" Naruto asked, unable to keep the building panic from his voice. He had felt something similar to this when his Gigi had arrived when he had experimented with his chakra the first time around, the uncontrollable chakra, not willing to stand down, violently churning within his body, searching for an explosive release. Unbidden, his mangled reflection returned to the forefront of his mind's eye, and Naruto barely managed to keep himself from a full-out panic attack. "Sensei? Control yourself, small one." "Kyubi?" Naruto was so surprised by the thunderous voice of the demon contained within the seal inscribed on his stomach, he simply forgot to panic. "Indeed," came the dry response. "Cease your panicking, small one, it will do you no good." "Well, what else am I supposed to do then? In case you haven't noticed, my chakra won't listen to me anymore." "Take care of the tone you take with me, little one." The Kyubi growled dangerously low, making Naruto involuntarily gulp in apprehension. "Now your chakra obviously doesn't wish to simply dissipate, and losing your hold on it will simply cause it to behave out of control. So, instead of lamenting what your chakra won't do, try to work with what you do have." The knowledge that the fox had a plan calmed Naruto down somewhat, and he felt his panic slowly ebb away. "So, what do I have?" He could almost feel the demon fox roll his eyes. "You have a powerful attack, and a very accomplished teacher. Contain your chakra, bring it under your control once more, and tell your sensei that whatever he has prepared for you to keep you from being injured from your own attack, he should implement it now." Naruto internally nodded, somehow having a feeling that the Kyubi saw the gesture. "Thanks, Foxy-san," Naruto mentally yelled, once again somehow feeling the tailed beast give an eye roll. While this was happening, Might Guy had been regarding his student warily. The child had obviously panicked at the loss of control over his chakra, after failing to let it dissipate, calling out to him in fear. However, just as Guy prepared himself to step in, Naruto had fallen silent, gaining a confused look on his face, and tilted his head, as if he were listening to something. The fear turned into confusion, and then turned into determination, Naruto sometimes giving a few nods to something Guy couldn't hear. It felt as if he were watching only one end of a conversation. And he had a sinking suspicion on who was on the other end of it. Apparently, the demon is capable of communication with Naruto-kun. The Hokage should be made aware of this as soon as possible. He was distracted from his musings by Naruto opening his eyes. Normally a bright, ocean blue, they now glowed with an inner power, making for quite an impressive sight, despite his student's young age. The child's face was still marred by apprehension, but the fear from before was now absent, instead having been replaced with remarkable determination. "Sensei, I can't dissipate the chakra I have gathered. I'm going to have released it into a punch. Please prepare whatever technique you have that will keep me from harm," the boy said in the most serious voice he could manage, though Guy still heard the small tremor the blonde tried to hide. He gave a grim smile, hoping it would reassure his student. "I am ready, Naruto-kun. Whenever you feel ready, please continue." Getting a nod from the child, he slid into his own stance, a slight variation to the standard Goken. Naruto nodded back to his teacher, before cocking back his fist again. The clearing he and his sensei were standing on had no obstacles that Naruto could focus on, so he simply decided to punch forwards and hope for the best. Letting out a yell, Naruto shot his fist out, the power behind the attack making Naruto streak forwards as well, upturning the ground underneath his feet. He almost feared that he would have a repeat of his first experiment as he approached the trees lining the clearing. And these were all trees of the great Hashirama variant, big and thick, a far cry from the spindly sapling Naruto had collided with during his first attempt. Fear threatened to overwhelm him as his fist edged ever closer to the bark of the tree. However, before he could make contact with the rough wood, his fist impacted something soft. A brief flash of green let him know that his sensei had caught his punch. Wow! Sensei is really strong! Naruto thought in awe, before his thought was cut off by pain starting to bloom in his arm and shoulder. Time slowed to a crawl, allowing Naruto to see what the problem was. Despite the power of his attack, his sensei remained unmoving, not giving even an inch. However, this meant that Naruto, who still had enormous forwards momentum, started to flatten his own arm. Much like a wild cart would smash itself apart when it slammed into a wall. However, it appeared that his sensei had come to the conclusion even before Naruto did. As time slowly started to speed up again, Naruto saw his sensei shift his grip, his arm moving backwards with Naruto's forwards momentum, his hand shifting its grip from Naruto's fist to his wrist. Turning on his own axis, Bushy-Brow's sensei pulled Naruto around, redirecting his momentum away from the tree. Now with his back towards the trees, Naruto almost let out a laugh. His sensei had done as promised and saved him from going splat against one of the trees. His laugh was cut off before it even had a chance to properly form, as now Naruto faced the clearing. While still having a lot of kinetic energy, which had yet to dissipate. And the ground looked rather uncomfortably hard. Before Naruto could give voice to his fears though, his sensei shifted his stance once more. Before he had pulled Naruto level across his chest. Now he let the arm holding Naruto trail behind silently, while dipping it slightly downwards. Meanwhile, Bushy-Brow's sensei other arm extended to point straight up to the sky, even as he twisted his torso slightly. Naruto was briefly reminded of a ninja throwing something as far as possible. Before realizing that his sensei was standing in the exact same position. Sensei? Sensei. Anything further Naruto would have liked to have yelled was cut off though, as with a mighty heave, Bushy-Brow's sensei threw Naruto high into the sky. Naruto was completely unashamed to admit he was yelling like a little girl, while he sailed upwards through the sky, Konoha slowly becoming smaller below him. He dimly registered the Kyuubi swearing up an impressive storm in the back of his mind, but any thoughts he could have had about that was cut off by the sheer terror that gripped him when he realized Konoha started to get bigger again. He was falling back down. Meanwhile, unknown to Naruto, several Nara who had been engrossed with the time-honored clan tradition of cloud watching blinked their eyes in surprise. Something orange was sailing through the sky. And it was screaming. Almost simultaneously, many of the Nara chalked it up to having lain in the sun for too long and to the shock of the rest of the village and their families, got up to continue with their ninja duties. As that was happening, high up in his office, looking out over the village, Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed to himself in contentment. The weather was great, and Naruto was finally cleared for training, which meant that Hiruzen at last had a moment of peace after a full week of being hounded by the hyperactive blonde. He had felt the massive amounts of chakra Naruto had called upon, naturally, and with a smile on his face turned towards that direction. Only to see something orange fall down from the sky. Slowly, a tick mark started to form on his head, as his office was drowned in his potent killing intent, making his secretary outside break out in cold sweat. Turning around, intent of making his way towards Naruto's training ground, Hiruzen saw that Salamander had already assembled the Hokage's personal bodyguard. The man's mask and crisp posture didn't betray anything. As Hiruzen stalked past, his robe snapping around him, he ground out not a word. His commander dipped his head. Of course, Hokage-sama. The amusement in the ninja's voice could not be concealed. During all this, Hatake Kakashi, who had steadily felt a growing sense of doom travel down his spine, was now holed up in his apartment, kunai ready in his hand. His paranoid mind had begun to fray at the edges as his nerves remained strung on high alert during the day. Ready for anything, Kakashi carefully moved over towards one of the windows looking out over Konoha, gently pushing away the blinds in order to look outside. And saw something orange fall down from the sky. Suddenly, the sense of dread that had followed him around all day increased exponentially. Back with Naruto, the boy was still yelling his head off, only pausing to take short gasps of much-needed air, before continuing to give voice to his fear. By now, he had descended low enough that he could make out the ground of the clearing, which was rapidly getting closer. Foxy-san, I just want you to know, I had really hoped we could become friends sometime down the line. Naruto thought dejectedly. I know, little one. I appreciate it. Maybe we could have become friends. The QB answered gravely. Naruto closed his eyes, prepared to meet the cold, unforgiving ground, and ready to go to the next life. Who knows, maybe they have an Ichiraku's there too. The ground got closer still, the wind whipping around Naruto's body, and he could almost feel how he was about to smash into the ground. YOSH. Have no fear, my student. I shall not let your flames of youth die out so easily, ha ha ha. Only to be tackled by something solid. With an oomph, Naruto felt strong arms catch him by the middle, his downwards momentum turned into a much lower, sideways one. Naruto and his savior skidded onto the ground, leaving a deep trench behind them. Naruto was carefully lowered to the ground, on which he thankfully splayed himself out, laying spread-eagled on his back looking up at the sky he had just descended from. Well, my youthful student? How do you feel? Tiredly turning his head, Naruto looked at his sensei, who was standing next to him, wearing his signature sparkling grin. Completely whipped out by his training and the experience of falling from high up in the sky, Naruto simply blurted out the first thing his mind could come up with. You threw me. Gai-sensei nodded, giving him a thumbs up. Indeed. And then I caught you. Naruto stared at his teacher dumbfoundedly, before giving a groan and closing his eyes once more. I do not like that man. The QB groused from within Naruto's mind. For once, he and the fox were in perfect agreement. The next day saw Naruto and his sensei on the same training ground. Naruto stared dubiously and somewhat warily at his teacher, who looked like crap. Sensei? What the hell happened to you? His teacher tried to give him one of his sparkling grins, but couldn't quite pull it off due to the black eye and the split lip. My useful student. It would appear that both the Hokage and my eternal rival Hatake Kakashi disagreed with my teaching methods. His teacher's raspy voice thankfully kept him from using his more boisterous volume, but Naruto couldn't help but feel somewhat concerned for the man. Absolutely crazy or not, the man was still dedicated to teaching Naruto, which earned him some concern at least. But are you alright? Naruto asked tentatively. Something he had said must have hit his teacher deeply, because suddenly the man was right there, shaking Naruto by the shoulders, a waterfall of tears flowing from his eyes. My youthful student. The concern for your teacher's health fuels my flames to unknown heights. I swear I will increase your fountain of youth so much that it may rival the greatness of your heart. And if I cannot do that, I will run around Konoha 300 times on my hands. Naruto was a little taken aback by the man's odd behavior and loud voice, but couldn't help but become enthusiastic himself. This man was gonna make him strong, Databeo. He made a promise, and to Naruto, a promise was more binding than any contract that could be written down on paper. OSSU. How do we start? Drawing himself to his full height, one hand on his hip, the other raising a finger to the sky, Bushibrao Sensei looked at Naruto with flames of determination in his eyes. In order to fan your flames of youth to an inferno. Yeah? In order to become the strongest that you can possibly be. Yeah? We shall start your grueling, but ultimately worth it, training regime with. Come on, just tell me already. Push-ups. 9th. History lessons. It was a sunny day as Naruto and his classmates were training in the yard of the academy, under the watchful eye of their sensei, Yumino Irika. While the rest of the children were running laps, preforming katas or endlessly repeating jumping jacks, Naruto was deep in focus. He was feeling for his chakra, the warmth storming through his veins, trying to wrestle it under his control. Slowly, oh so terribly slowly, the by now familiar shroud was starting to form around Naruto's body, its swirling motions in homage to the boys' clan. As the blue glow started to grow brighter, it began to draw the attention of his classmates and his sensei. The other children stopped their exercises, gaping at the amount of chakra the blonde was calling upon. Irika started to approach his student hurriedly, fearing for what might happen to the boy should the swirling chakra prove to be beyond the Uzumaki's control. Again. Before he reached him, however, Naruto gained a confident smirk, opened his now glowing eyes, and lifted his right arm parallel to his shoulder. Briefly, Iruka wondered what the prankster was up to, when his question was answered by the sudden increase of the cloud surrounding the boy's arm. Instead of swirling around it with a little over an inch of thickness, it explosively expanded, forming a swirling cocoon of a little over a foot in diameter, roughly resembling Naruto's arm. With a yell that shook the earth, the blonde raised his arm over his head, before slamming it down into the ground with an even greater shock, completely shattering the ground beneath him. Both Iruka and Naruto were blasted of their feet, Iruka managing to right himself at the last moment though, while Naruto was a little more unfortunate. Flying end over tea kettle, Naruto ended up looking at the cloud-free sky, wondering just how he got in that position. Within moments, however, the sky was replaced by the furious face of Yumino Iruka, bearing down upon him in righteous fury. Hey there, sensei. Naruto hesitantly ventured. Naruto. Naruto could tell he had made his sensei angrier than usual. The throbbing veins in the man's forehead were a big clue. Being pushed a little further into the ground solely by the man's voice was also pretty enlightening. What, in the name of Kami's hairy ballsack, was that? Filing away the expletive for later, it was a pretty good one, especially since it came from the normally prudish Iruka-sensei. Naruto went for his most innocent look. Judging by the way his teacher's face started to become more and more red, it wasn't working really well. I didn't mean to. I just thought that putting more chakra would make the shroud bigger. It would let me punch harder. The Akimichi do it! Naruto yelled in desperation. Choji, who, like the rest of the class, had been able to hear every word of the conversation, quickly paled and hid his face in his chips bag, not willing to face the wrath of his sensei. None really blamed him. Meanwhile, Iruka had been steadily reaching a boiling point. Do you have any idea just how dangerous that was? You were basically turning your own body into a version of Hiramakari. Instead of showing understanding, sympathy, or even horror at his own actions, Naruto's face simply scrunched up in confusion. Hiram, what no? For a moment, Iruka blew up his cheeks, his fingers twitching with murderous intent. He closed his eyes and started counting to 10. Then started counting backwards. Then started reciting all the old cryptology codes that he had learned during his days as an academy student. Finally, he slowly released an enormous breath through pursed lips, slightly ruffling Naruto's hair in the process. Keeping his eyes closed, Iruka pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the rough skin of the scar that ran horizontally across it under his fingertips. Hiramakari. One of the 7 swords of the mist, used by the 7 swordsmen. Unseen to him, Naruto's eyes lit up. The 7 swordsmen? Who were they? Were they strong? They sound strong. Iruka sighed, opening his eyes in order to offer a sharp rebuke, but was stopped when he saw that every eye of every student was fixed intently on him, curiosity clearly visible in all of them. Slowly, he started answering Naruto's question, warily keeping an eye on the alertness of his students, on the lookout for the telltale signs of boredom, now a trademark of every history lesson he had ever given. Yes, the 7 swordsmen were strong. Very strong, in fact. Their first installment can be considered to be on par with our own Sannin, in terms of fame and abilities. Following generations were not as powerful, but are still considered the elite forces of Kiri, much like the Kinkaku squad is to Kumo. Surreptitiously he checked all the other students, checking for any signs of inattention. He was shocked to his core. Not a single one of them wasn't paying attention, all of them listening intently to his story. Really? That sounds awesome. Were the Ginkaku squad really strong as well? Kinkaku, and yes, they were. Iruka distractedly replied to Naruto's question, his mind running faster than the speediest of career ninja, which was very speedy indeed. I can't believe it. They're actually paying attention. I need to capitalize on this, but how? Iruka furiously thought to himself, glancing around the gathered students, before his eyes landed on Naruto, who was still staring expectantly at him, obviously waiting for the rest of the story. As a plan started forming in his head, Iruka grinned at the gathered students. In fact, the Kinkaku squad was so strong, they were instrumental in the Hokage being elected to be the Sandaime. As expected, the mention of their current Hokage immediately gripped Naruto's undivided attention, always eager to learn more about his grandfather figure. Really? Iruka's grin widened, as he leaned down so he could look his students in the eye. He nodded and whispered in his most conspiratorial voice, Really, really. Want me to tell you how? It's a story filled with a lot of adventure and great danger. In unison, the entire class yelled out, Hai sensei. Let's go back inside. Irika smirked. Meanwhile, in the largest office of the Hokage Tower, the Hokage himself was staring forlornly at a little orange book. He had, somehow, managed to finish all of his paperwork for once, and having nothing on his schedule for the next half hour or so, had greatly anticipated reading his student's greatest legacy. Unfortunately, just when he cracked open the vibrant orange cover, his senses picked up an enormous chakra spike from the adjacent training grounds of the academy. Well, that, and his hearing had also picked up an enormous boom that had rattled his windows. In a frustrated tone, rubbing a head against his aching forehead, Hiruzen growled the name of his tormentor through clenched teeth. Naruto. Why has it always got to be you? Why? With a look of great emotional pain, Hiruzen gently placed the amazing piece of high-standing literature back in its secret compartment within his desk, already knowing that he would be pestered by one of the most annoying and useful ninja his village employed. Right on cue, Shimura Danzo, Hiruzen's ex-teammate, sometimes friend, mostly rival, an all-around unpleasant person, shuffled into the Hokage's office. Hiruzen. I should be in that chair. Danzo. Not even if the sage of the six paths himself would give it to you. Standard pleasantries out of the way, Danzo immediately came down to business. Both of them knew why he was there anyway. Today's chakra spike at the academy once more proves my point, Hiruzen. The weapon is both too powerful and too unmanaged to be safely put with his classmates. Who, I don't have to remind you, Hiruzen, are all heirs of prominent clans. And yet you remind me anyways, Hiruzen coolly replied. Only a slight twitch by the man's uncovered eyebrow showed that Danzo conceded this verbal spar to his rival. Not giving his enemy the chance to press on, Hiruzen continued. Before you make any further claims or demands, Danzo, perhaps we should examine the situation at the academy? It would be unadvisable to make decisions on a situation one doesn't fully understand, after all, the aged Hokage said, his voice hard as steel. The corners of Danzo's mouth drew slightly downwards at the dig at his many, more radical, decisions in the past, which had had long-lasting consequences, almost all of them affecting Konoha in a negative way. Inclining his head by the smallest of margins, Danzo conceded. Very well, lead on. I intend to. For a very long time, in fact. The walk to the academy had been blissfully short, what with it being located directly next to the Hokage Tower, but Hiruzen still felt wrung out at the end of it. Every step of the way had been a chain of verbal battles between him and his old friend, and to his shame, or Danzo's credit, the aged Hokage couldn't say that he had won all of them. Walking a few paces behind them, Hiruzen could feel the silent support of Salamander, which heartened him greatly, even if the ANBU commander couldn't speak up against the advisor, who, in the underhanded, unofficial way of all ninja, somehow outranked him, despite not holding a military position. Ignoring the starstruck gazes of several teachers he passed in the hallways, Hiruzen steadily approached Naruto's classroom. The teacher was Yumino Irika, a promising young chunin, whose obvious love for teaching in Naruto had greatly endeared him to his Hokage. Obviously, the scarred teacher's file had passed Danzo's desk as well, despite this being highly illegal, as the man commented upon seeing the little sign proclaiming this room to be Irika's. Yumino-sen should be able to provide us with an accurate account of events, I should think. I know so, Danzo, because that's the very reason we came here. Hiruzen snapped back, immediately cursing his temper inside his head. Had that been said in a level, condescending tone of voice, that would have been a point for him. But being said in the way it was, it could be considered more of a tie. Danzo obviously was aware of this fact, judging by the small, if not enormously smug, smirk his advisor sent at him. Growling under his breath, Hiruzen slammed open the door, far too irritated to bother knocking. And so he said, in a great, booming, thunderous voice, "Let them come! Let them come and I shall face them! With kunai, with jutsu and with the fire that burns in all of our hearts!" Before feeling his jaw fall open. Standing with one foot on his chair, the other planted firmly on his desk, Yumino Irika struck a heroic pose. In one hand, he had a kunai, now raised to the sky, and the headband that usually rested on his forehead was now drawn over his left eye, much like Kakashi wore it. His face was set into a thunderous expression of implacable heroism, and as Hiruzen took in the students in the class, he noticed that more than one of them had tears streaming down their faces. Our seals remain strong and our arms stronger still. It doesn't matter that we are outnumbered. It doesn't matter that we now face, not one, not two, but 3 major villages. Do you know why? Because by the sage's wrinkly beard, we are Uzumaki. A great roar went up from the students, some of them stomping their feet on the ground. Who's with me? Who will stand with the Uzumaki against their foes? Who will aid me in protecting that which is most precious to us? Our home, our family? Who stands with me on this day? There fell a brief silence, during which Hiruzen absently noticed his own faint heartbeat, before the sound of a chair scraping across a wooden floor rang out over the classroom. Standing with trembling fists, head bowed and tears streaming down his face, Naruto answered. I will stand by my family. I will protect my precious people. The boy looked up, fire in his eyes as he raised a clenched fist in front of him. Databao. There was a brief silence, before another chair was pulled back. Hiruzen felt his eyebrows trying to raise themselves even higher in surprise when he noticed it was the Uchiha this time. He too had tears streaming down his face, but he stood tall, chest puffed out and hands planted firmly on his hips. He turned his head a little to the right, just as the sun shone its rays through the nearby window, throwing the onyx-eyed child in a dramatic lighting. Hiruzen could almost hear the girls' hearts simultaneously melting. The Uzumaki shall not stand alone. The Uchiha will aid them, on my honor I swear this. Immediately following the dramatic statement, another student stood up. Hiruzen recognized her as Haishi's eldest, though gone was the meek little girl he had sometimes seen in passing. Now, chakra was blazing from her fingertips, while the Byakugan prominently stood out on her delicate features. As will the Hyuga. On my honor I swear this. The little girl roared with passion. Almost before she was done, several other chairs were pulled back, a multitude of voices rang out. As will the Akimichi. On my honor I swear this. So I guess there's nothing to it then. The Nara will stand with the Uzumaki, on my honor I swear this. You bet that the Yamanaka will stand with the Uzumaki. On my honor I swear this. The Inuzuka will fight with the Uzumaki. On my honor I swear this. Bark. And Akamaru does as well. The Abirame will stand with the Uzumaki. Why? Because never before has a member of our clan been reduced to tears. On my honor I swear this. Stunned, Hiruzen watched as each and every child, from shinobi clans and civilians alike, pledged to fight alongside the Uzumaki in whatever conflict Irika had apparently just played out. Feeling the heavy glare of Danzo in the back of his head, demanding he do something about all of this, Hiruzen sighed. Touching as it was, he simply had to intervene now. Yumano Irika. There was a horrified silence, as both children and sensei stared wide-eyed at their leader standing in the doorway to their classroom. In a flash, every single child sat back in their chair, their backs rigid against their chairs, heads all pointing straight ahead. In that same flash, Irika had suddenly appeared before Hiruzen's feet, faster than his eyes could track, prostrating himself before his leader. The Hokage could tell the teacher was whiter than a ghost, and having spent half a century amongst the elite of the ninja world, Hiruzen was talking from experience here, and shaking like one of the leaves his village was named for. What's the meaning of this? The Hokage thundered in his most commanding voice, shaking some dust loose from the ceiling. Somehow, Irika managed to press himself even further into the wooden floor, tearfully answering his leader. And my absolute, most sincerest apologies, Hokage-sama. Somehow I got caught up in. Silence. Hiruzen boomed again, making the pencils on the student's desk rattle. This is an outrage. An abomination. The gravest insult to a great and noble history imaginable. Behind him, he could almost feel Danzo's surprised but approving look, while in front of him, Irika was now openly crying. You understand, Hokage-sama. After all Hiruzen said, pausing for a moment. He could hear the students all sharply inhale in dread, could see the rivers of tears streaming down Irika's face thicken even more, and could imagine in great detail the vindictive glee of Danzo, as they all waited for the hammer to fall. This is how one should reenact the last stand of Uzu. Irika's head shot up in surprise, as both the students and Danzo gasped in concert. Faintly, the sound of an armored glove hitting a porcelain mask could be heard in the background. Turning around in order to face his desk, Irika saw the Hokage. But not like he usually saw his benevolent leader. No, this one was standing much like he had mere moments ago. His ceremonial had a kimbo on his head, covering one eye, while the man's robes were tied by their sleeves around his throat, showing of the armor the Hokage always wore underneath them, while the robes themselves were now fluttering dramatically in the wind. In a closed classroom. Darkness had fallen outside, even though mere moments ago it had been a bright, sunny day, and thunder could be heard, while rain softly started falling. Again, in a closed classroom. A brief flash of flame lit up the darkness, illuminating the Hokage's lined face, minus the eye that was covered by the hat, throwing it into sharp contrast. Exhaling deeply the smoke from his recently lit pipe, the aged leader started talking, softly at first but steadily louder, until he was roaring at the top of his lungs. My friends. Today, we stand at the end of an era. Our enemies, too cowardly to face our great might on their own, have now grouped together and are howling at our gates. Our seals, our great seals which have kept us safe for so long, are starting to fail against the onslaught of our rabid foes. Konoha has sent aid, but ere they arrive here, all that shall remain of Yizu are but mere ruins. But do we accept this? Do we flee before the darkness? Do we flee before insurmountable odds? No! For we are Uzumaki! The blood of the sage himself runs through our veins. I stand here before you, unafraid of the battle to come. They may have many, but I have you. I have you, my precious people, and together, we shall protect that which we hold most dear. After today, our buildings may be smashed, our bloodlines broken, but our name shall never be forgotten. From this day, until the end of days, tales will be some of the valor of Yuzu, who alone stood against its many foes, and how it made them bleed. How it refused to bow down. How it declared that it would not go quietly into the night. Today, on this day, I will fight and die for you, that our name will be remembered for all days to come, and for our sacrifice to never be forgotten. I ask of you now, will you stand with me? For Yuzu? For our home? For our friends, our family? Will you stand with me, to protect your precious people? By now, tears were once more flowing down everyone's faces, and without really having any say in it, Irika felt how his body raised an arm, and he could hear himself roar alongside his students. Yes, we will. Off to the side during all of this, Danzo was looking on in shock, his mouth hanging open and his eye widened fully. Salamander stepped up next to him, and while his face was concealed, his posture was clearly that of a defeated man. What? How? Wait. What? Danzo stammered helplessly. Salamander gently patted him on the shoulder. I know how you feel, the ANBU commander said in an understanding tone of voice, before turning around and slowly starting to make his way out of the academy. Is it too early to drink? TCH, what am I saying? I'm the ANBU commander to Sarutobi Hiruzen. It's never too early to drink. Meanwhile, Danzo was left watching with a twitching eyebrow as his former friend and hated rival led a group of children, and one teacher, on a charge through one of the windows with a battle cry, one that for some reason sounded suspiciously like for Ramin. Wait. What? It was, as it always is, a bright and sunny day in the oldest hidden village in the elemental countries. People could be seen bustling in the thriving village, off on various errands or simply out for a walk in order to enjoy the plentiful sun. Ninja could be seen as dark blurry shapes, hopping from rooftop to rooftop. While customers coming to Konoha would be amazed at the speed and agility displayed by a hurrying ninja, the civilians knew better. Despite not being ninja themselves, they had lived long enough amongst their mass-murdering neighbors to know that for a shinobi, such a rapid trip across the rooftops was comparable to a relaxing stroll. After all, a ninja who was in a hurry was a ninja who was either too fast or too crafty to be seen by mere civilians. If we move towards the edges of the village, we come across several of the training grounds open to the ninja of Konoha. Protected with more than was visible to the untrained eye, and several trained eyes as well, these areas were generally used by the jounin which had genin teams, the genin themselves, or by individual or teams of chunin, hoping to hone their skills. Jounin, of course, either had too destructive or too secretive techniques to simply practice out in the open, and instead made use of several hidden training grounds, the location of which wasn't known to the civilians. Or a lot of the other shinobi forces, for that matter. The ANBU, on the other hand, were rumored to have entire training facilities hidden throughout, and under, the village. Of course, the only ones who knew where they were even located were the currently active ANBU themselves, since this information is removed by a Yamanaka from the ANBU who decide to retire. Not that that mattered to those ANBU who retired on a more complete, and a definitely more permanent basis. It says everything you ever need to know about the ANBU that the last operative a Yamanaka had to mind wipe was Kakashi, despite the ANBU having had multiple changes of rosters since then. But the focus of our story isn't the secretive facilities of the ANBU, or even the hidden training grounds of the jounin. No, our focus lies with one of the more commonly used training grounds, which were open to all shinobi forces. It appeared like many of the other training grounds, consisting of a rather large clearing, surrounded by a small forest, and through which ran a small creek. The majority of the training grounds were equipped in such a way. This was done in order to simulate a scenario most shinobi would encounter in battle, many of which would take place in Fire Country itself, given the fact that mostly genin and chunin trained here, who usually didn't leave the border all that much. Of course, there were other, more specialized training grounds, which simulated the climates and surroundings of the other elemental countries, such as an artificial desert for Wind Country, or a rocky terrain, void of any vegetation, for Earth Country. There were rumors among civilians that there was a gigantic outdoor pool as a simulation for Water Country, but one was never found, and the shinobi either confirmed or denied it. But once more I digress. After all, we are more interested in one of the more generic training grounds, where the sound of flesh impacting wood could be heard clearly amongst the babbling of the nearby creek, and the chirping of the birds. Thwack! 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 203. 204. 205. In the clearing of the training ground, 3 wooded poles were planted firmly in the ground. Each one was roughly as thick as a man's chest, and would come up to the average man's hip. All 3 were showing signs of obvious wear, crisscrossed with cuts and small burns and with pieces of wood even missing completely. The cause of these marks was currently abusing the middle post, leading to the sound we heard earlier. Thwack! 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 206. 207. 208. A small boy, no older than 8, was relentlessly punching the middle post, little chips of wood springing away with every punch. The child had impossibly bright yellow hair, sticking out in a spiky pattern which appeared to not have been informed of the laws of gravity yet. The blond boy wore rather standard clothing, consisting of a white t-shirt and blue pants, except for the somewhat shiny bandages that covered his hands up to halfway of the forearms, sans the fingers, which were left exposed. Thwack! 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 209. 210. 211. Standing a little way off from the training child, with his arms crossed in front of his chest, stood perhaps the oddest man in all of the elemental nations. Clad in nothing but a green spandex jumpsuit, with vibrant orange legwarmers and a red sash on his hips, many would question not only his fashion sense, but if the man had any common sense at all. And that's without even taking the man's eyebrows into account. By Kami, those eyebrows! Gigantic things, they were thick and hairy in the most unnatural of ways, appearing more as particularly thick and hairy caterpillars than eyebrows. They were so eye-catching, for all the wrong reasons, one could easily be forgiven for missing the man's haircut, which was shaped into an impossibly gleaming bowl cut. This man was Might Guy, the beautiful green beast of Konoha, infamous Taijutsu master, copycat Kakashi's eternal rival. Thwack! 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 212. 213. 214. And since about a year ago, Uzumaki Naruto's teacher. Said child was still mercilessly hammering away at the unyielding wooden post under the watchful gaze of his sensei, either not caring or not noticing the way he was dripping in sweat. Thwack! Thwack! 214. 215. Suddenly, Guy called out to his student, his exuberant voice easily rising above the sound of Naruto's training. YOSH, my youthful student! You may stop your intelligent hard work now, your flames of youth have truly been fanned into an inferno of youth today. Hi, sensei! Naruto called back with a relieved pant, before falling flat on his face. Chuckling, Guy made his way to his student, who had managed to roll himself over, so he was now lying spread-eagled on the ground, looking up at the fluffy cloud serenely drifting by. Unknown to him, several Nara had the odd feeling someone was muscling in on their monopoly on cloud watching. This could have become a major and sensational plot point in the story, as the Nara would rise up against whoever thought they had a right to stare at their clouds, causing much strife and drama in Konoha as a result. However, the Nara were too lazy to actually get up and do anything about it, so they simply continued to lay down and stare at the clouds, opting to try to ignore the newcomer with a practice that came from years of saying yes dear, I'll do it tomorrow. Needless to say, this practice sometimes got a raised eyebrow whenever a Nara wasn't, in fact, at home, but say, in the Hokage's office. But that's a tale for another time. For now, we return to Naruto, who is being helped into a sitting position by his sensei. Guy handed his student a bottle of water cooled with a simple jutsu used for cooling things. Naruto eagerly accepted the cool water, taking great gulps of the life-giving liquid, though taking care not to drink too fast. Experience was a harsh teacher, after all. Waiting a little before his student had regained his composure, Guy started talking in a noticeably softer and warmer voice. So, Naruto, are you excited for tomorrow? Immediately the child nodded with such enthusiasm, he spilled a little from the water bottle. You bet, Guy-sensei. I can't wait to go back to the academy and show them just how much stronger I've become, Dadabayo. Naruto yelled boisterously, making his sensei laugh. That's good to hear, Naruto, the spandex-clad man said with a big smile. But remember, a genius of hard work is never done. You must still try your best at the academy, and try to learn as much as you can from your senseis. All of your senseis, Naruto. The last part was said sternly. Naruto's head dropped, as his face formed a stubborn pout. I'll try, sensei. The child muttered, though it was obvious he wasn't pleased at all about it. And that's all I'll ever ask of you, Naruto, Guy said with a warm smile. Spirits lifted, Naruto happily nodded back at his sensei. Guy clapped his hands together as he stood straight again, a large smile on his face which literally sparkled in the sunlight. YOSH, he said in his usual tone, let's finish up for today, shall we, my youthful student? Naruto simply looked confused, glancing from the sun high in the sky to his sensei and back. Already Bushibrao sensei? It's still light out. First, a finger suddenly appeared in front of Naruto's face, causing him to fall backwards with an eep of surprise. My name is still not Bushibrao sensei. Second, a second finger appeared. Tomorrow is a big day for you, my youthful student. While I admire the way in which you wish to fan your flames of youth to even greater heights, a genius of hard work should always know when it is best not to work. The short impromptu speech was capped off by a thumbs up and another impossibly bright smile. Huh? Guy face faulted. Standing up with a great sigh and dusting off his pristine green spandex jumpsuit, the oddest man in the world clarified himself. What I mean is that in order for your big day tomorrow, you should make sure that you take plenty of rest, leaving you all the more prepared for when you truly need it. Ah, Naruto said, as understanding lit up his face. So that means that today we won't be going on with training until the sun is coming up again, then go to bed, only to rise with the sun the next day? The child yelled excitedly, his hopeful face that of a dehydrated man who, after years of crawling through the unforgiving desert, finally stumbles across an oasis filled with food and drink and, more importantly, busted naked ladies. Very lonely busted ladies. Well, yes, Guy said, a little confused as to why his student appeared so relieved that he would be missing out on the greatest and most youthful of training regiment in the world, courtesy of yours truly. Ignoring Naruto's whoops and tears of joy, Guy cleared his throat, patiently waiting for attention. He had to clear it several more times before he finally got it. By now, that patience was pretty much gone. Right, before I let you go home, Naruto, please preform your technique one final time, so we can see the results of your year of training under me. Hi, sensei! Naruto yelled excitedly, giving a sloppy salute, before falling into a now familiar stance. Feet spread slightly apart, with one fist clenched at his side and his eyes closed. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened, before suddenly, Naruto started to glow, the glow quickly growing into a blue flickering shroud, appearing as if it was made out of an ethereal flame. As a current of wind began to surround the young Uzumaki, the shroud started churning wildly around his body, carving deep grooves in the ground beneath his feet. As the shroud began swirling faster and faster around him, a more solid shroud sprang into existence around the boy's fist, rolling madly around his bandages, which started to glow in the same color as the rest of the shroud. Finally, Naruto opened his eyes, which were now glowing brightly with an inner light, and let out a yell which was audible to most of Konoha. Briefly he crouched a little deeper, coiling his body, before he pushed off, cratering the ground beneath him. Shooting forwards in nothing but a blur, creating a deep furrow in the ground, Naruto shot off towards his target, the wooden post he had been punching mere minutes ago. Tum! Guy had to shield his eyes for a few seconds before looking back towards his student. What he saw made him smile proudly. A smile which was mirrored on his pupil's face, as Naruto stood grinning like an idiot at his bandaged fist, the wrap still faintly glowing blue, while his fist was still smoking slightly. The wooden post was completely gone, as were the two to the side of it. Naruto still had an enormously bright smile on his face as he walked back towards the academy. Sure, it sucked that he had to return there in the first place, but training under Guy had been so cool. Even though most of it had been rather boring straightforward stuff in trying to strengthening his body, just having a sensei who was trying his best to help him out and make him stronger was the greatest thing in the world to Naruto. So, it was with lifted spirits that Naruto started his second time in the first year at the academy. Those spirits became increasingly harder to lift as the months started to drag on though. He was starting to get bored. In terms of the academic stuff, Naruto still wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and he knew that. Despite this, he still gave it his all, he promised, after all, and he never breaks his promises, but to his surprise found out that a lot of the basics he had either picked up in his previous year at the academy, or under the tutelage of Guise-sensei. As a result, his interest in the theory of being a ninja plummeted quicker than his grades on the exams. In terms of all the physical stuff though, he was one of the best of his class, a novel sensation to the young Naruto. His year under Guy, while focused more on just increasing his strength and stamina, had inevitably led to Naruto being instructed in taijutsu several levels above the academy-level curriculum. In fact, he would have been the very best in terms of taijutsu, if not for the few clan children in his class, who had had lessons from their clan, giving them a leg up on the other civilian children. The most notable of these children, however, was one of those Hyuga guys, the ones with the creepy eyes, the long hair, and the sticks up their butts. Niji, for some reason, disliked him intensely, and took great pleasure in winning every single one of their spars. This, of course, riled Naruto up, who was not only a pretty sore loser, a flaw which he was aware of, but had no idea how to handle, but also incredibly proud of his hard work, an attitude already present in the young Uzumaki and which had been polished by the work ethic of Might Guy. Eventually, this all came to a head during one of their spars, about 2 months after Naruto had joined the academy again. All day long, Naruto had been in a foul mood, due to Niji taunting him at every possibility, of which there agonizingly were many. First there were of course their test results, in which the Hyuga prodigy had surpassed Naruto's grade by a mile. Something the genius took great pleasure in pointing out in great detail. Naruto, though annoyed, tried not to let to get it to him too much, reasoning that, since he hadn't worked hard at the theory, a natural genius was bound to do better than him. All he had to do was work hard next time on a test, and his genius of hard work would surpass Niji's natural genius. Sadly, this reasoning didn't help him when the class was taken outside, in order to practice the practical parts of the shinobi trade. First came the accuracy test, which is where the trouble truly began. Now, Naruto was by no means doing badly. He hit the target more often than he missed, and he even received a sort of backhanded compliment from his sensei that his throws were very powerful. Niji, however, managed to hit everything, without even breaking a sweat. Predictably, another tirade followed, in which Niji dragged up every possible reason as to why he was inherently superior to Naruto, conveniently leaving out the fact that he was a year older than the blonde. Naruto, of course, started to defend himself in the only way he knew how, by yelling loudly. It wasn't helped by the Kyuubi egging him on with its insidious whispers, apparently having a great time while the two children bickered, the harsher the insults the better. Of course, it was Naruto who ended up with detention for disturbing the lesson, even though Niji had matched his volume insult for insult. This, of course, did nothing to take away Naruto's anger, which was left to quietly stew as they were taken to the small arena the academy used for spars between students. As luck, or as Niji would argue, fate, would have it, eventually Naruto and Niji were paired up together. Naruto was well and truly seeing red now, due to the Kyuubi not relenting in trying to rile the child up. Standing a few feet apart, not having made the sign of confrontation despite the teacher ordering them to do so, the two boys stared each other in the eye. And then Niji started talking. Later, Naruto couldn't be able to tell you just what it was that Niji had said to him, due to not really paying attention and the Kyuubi's unrelenting voice combining with that of Niji's. The end result, though, became somewhat of a legend in the academy. At some unseen command, Naruto and Niji shot off towards each other, faster than any preteen had any right to move. Naruto, of course, started with wild strikes, added with a few kicks, overall showing a bastardized and simplified version of the Goken. Niji, however, was like water to Naruto's rock. The pale-eyed child either flowed around the attacks, or guided them away with what almost could be mistaken for gentleness, if not for the hate-filled gaze of the Hyuga. All the while, Niji didn't stop taunting Naruto. So, this is what a year training under the greatest taijutsu master of Konoha does to your skills, Uzumaki. They raise them from barely existing to barely recognizable. A wide swing, followed by a brutal knee strike, both of which are almost danced around, leaving them to hit nothing but air. Shut up. Why, Uzumaki? Is the truth of my words that unacceptable to you? Does the fact that you can finally see that fate will always hold you down finally register with your loser brain? Another kick, this time aimed to take his head off his shoulders, but it is caught and pushed away and above, making the attack go wild in this. Face it, Uzumaki, you are a loser, and a loser like you will never be able to beat a genius like me. Shut up. To the surprise of all present, not the least of which Niji himself, Naruto nearly exploded with a blue light. Covered in a shroud of blue flames, Naruto attacked once more. The difference was immediately visible though. Naruto's speed was raised so he appeared little more than a blur to his classmates, shattering the ground every time he pushed off. He appeared to be stronger as well, because when Neji tried to deflect a punch aimed at his chest, he found that Naruto's fist simply ignored his guard, smashing into his solar plexus. Jumping back, to create a little distance and buy himself some time, though if Naruto's new speed was anything to go by, it really wouldn't help all that much, Neji prepared himself, briefly closing his eyes. Naruto, who admittedly wasn't really thinking straight at this point, thanks to the Kyuubi manipulating his anger to even greater heights, interpreted this as another insult from the Hyuga, as if he was claiming that he could beat Naruto, even with his eyes closed. I'll show him. I'll show all of them. Naruto shot off, once more creating a furrow in the ground, chakra covering his form, and making the wraps around his hands light up in a blue glow. Cocking back his fist, the bandages glowing even brighter, Naruto prepared himself to launch his opponent straight into next week. And the week after that, if he was lucky. Just before the hit landed though, Neji opened his eyes, with a whispered command, only audible to the two of them. Byakugan. Veins stood out prominently on the prodigy's face, accentuating the child's dojutsu. Chakra blazed from his fingertips, as his hands blurred forwards, striking Naruto a few times in the torso, as Neji threw himself to the side. Boom! Where Neji stood mere moments before was now a small crater, with Naruto's fist, wrapped in blue glowing bandages, in the center. Both children straightened themselves, each carefully taking in their opponent. I don't know what he's doing, but damn it, my chest hurts. Like a lot. Naruto thought to himself, trying to hide a grimace, as he gently rubbed his chest through his shirt. That's the Hyuga's gentle fist. Instead of hitting your outside, they use their Byakugan to hit your inside. The Kyuubi spoke up, sounding uncharacteristically serious. Your inside? That's just weird. Naruto thought in confusion, keeping his eyes on his opponent. Scratch weird, little one, try dangerous. How dangerous can be attacking the inside of you be? You can train your outsides, small one, strengthen your muscles and harden your skin. But can you train your organs? Can you train your heart, or your lungs, to take a hit and keep going? Naruto gulped as his imagination provided some gruesome images. That, or the Kyuubi did, Naruto wouldn't put it past the ancient fox. That's pretty scary. I know. Which is why you need to stop dicking around, little one. That one doesn't look like he's holding back. If not for your chakra shroud and natural toughness, those last couple of strikes could have done some serious damage, the Kyuubi said grimly. Naruto didn't say anything back, but he didn't have to. Setting his mouth in a thin line, Naruto sunk a little lower in his stance, while the chakra surrounding his body started to rapidly grow larger. Naruto was ready for round 2. Meanwhile, Neji was also contemplating his opponent. My strikes were not stopped per se, but definitely slowed or muted. It must be that chakra shroud. My gentle fist can breach it, but it takes power to do so, leaving my strikes less powerful as a result. Neji's brilliant mind concluded within seconds. While known Nara, Neji's label as a genius wasn't bandied about without reason. Not only powerful, but incredibly smart, Neji lived up to his impressive reputation. Still, knowing how his defense works doesn't really help me much in overcoming it. The obvious answer, of course, is to simply use more power, but I'm not proficient enough to simply dump more chakra in the gentle fist without either harming myself or killing Uzumaki. Neji thought to himself grimly, though his face betrayed none of his doubts. Of course, if I can hit his Tenketsu, then I can shut down his shroud, and finally put that loser in the place fate has ordained for him. But his shroud is so bright, I cannot even make out his pathways. It was true, to Neji's Byakugan, Naruto wasn't a dark shape through which ran bright pathways to and from a central chakra core, like everybody else. No, Naruto appeared like a person, completely filled and surrounded by chakra, making it impossible to make out anything else but the silhouette of Naruto's body. Naruto wasn't the first to achieve such a feat, though he was probably one of the youngest, and his method was certainly unique. But in the history of the shinobi world, there have been several ninja who had been both clever enough to find a way around the Byakugan. Interesting fact about the Byakugan, it can see through almost everything with relative ease. Chakra, however, doesn't fall under almost everything. While a Byakugan can easily see through a genjutsu, this is only a very thin layer of chakra, which doesn't correspond with the shapes in the rest of the world, hence why a Hyuga can almost always tell when he's placed under a genjutsu. However, a genjutsu is a very thin film of chakra. Make the chakra film significantly thicker, and suddenly, the Byakugan cannot look through it anymore. Of course, this is also dependent of the skill of the Hyuga. For instance, if Naruto had tried to fight Hyuga Hayashi, current clan head of the Hyuga, then Hayashi would barely hesitate in shutting down every single Tenketsu in Naruto's body, the clan head's greater experience and more powerful Byakugan winning it from Naruto's shroud. Neji, however, had only received training in the gentle fist, in the sense that he had been taught how to strike at a person's innards and soft tissue. He had yet to be properly instructed in how to strike and close another person's Tenketsu. Neji, being the genius he is, had already managed to make some progress with this, despite not having been taught how to do so, but that wasn't sufficient enough to properly use it against Naruto now. On top of that, while his Byakugan was hailed as the most powerful seen in generations, he was still a 9-year-old kid. It simply wasn't matured enough to pierce Naruto's thick shroud. There's nothing to it then. I must use the gentle fist and try to strike hard enough to down the loser. Neji thought coldly to himself. Unspoken, a message passed between the two combatants, unseen by their audience, but clear as day to the other. Bring it. And they obliged. Both shot forward at the same time, Naruto covered in blue flaming chakra, Neji with chakra blazing from his fingertips. Naruto was still faster, his training under Might Guy and his shroud making him the swiftest 8-year-old in Konoha. As he reached Neji, his fist shot out, his bandages glowing dangerously. Neji ducked under it, however, striking at the arm and Naruto's unprotected side several times in the span of mere seconds. Naruto, however, gave nothing more than a grunt and brought up a knee in order to strike Neji in the chest. Recognizing the danger, and realizing that Naruto was too strong to properly block, Neji jumped back a few feet. His opponent didn't let up though, closely following Neji's footsteps, letting out lightning-fast jabs with his left arm, occasionally throwing in a kick or two. Neji was forced back several steps, furiously dodging whenever he could, and gritting his teeth whenever he couldn't. Every strike of Naruto rattled his bones, despite only clipping him slightly. Frowning, Neji thought to himself, I need to change my tactics. He's forcing me on the defensive and turning it in a war of attrition, which we both know he will win. It was the single thing that Neji would concede to his opponent: he had stamina. All of their fights ended in his favor because he shut the Uzumaki down quickly and harshly, as fast as he could. But he had seen the loser fight others in the ring before. While the rest of the class were losers as well, it was still telling in the way his opponent would be forced to fight in 3 back-to-back matches and still have the most energy left out of all of them at the end of the day. Having reached his decision, Neji intentionally lagged in bringing up his guard after having deflected one of Naruto's kicks. Predictably, Naruto saw the opening and without hesitation tried to go for another punch to the chest. However, at the very last moment, Neji twisted around the strike and stepped forwards, inside Naruto's guard. Seeing his opponent's eyes widen in fear and understanding, Neji let out a cruel sneer and shoved both hands, still glowing with the effects of the gentle fist, into Naruto's chest. Hard. With a strangled yell, Naruto was flung back through the air several feet, before crashing into the ground and sliding a few feet further. Neji barely managed to keep a sigh of relief from escaping him. Everything was sore, both from pushing his own body to match Naruto's speed, as well as from the few glancing hits he had taken from Naruto's technique. Fixing a sneer on his face, prepared to give another speech as to why his opponent was and always would be a loser, thanks to fate, Neji opened his mouth. Before he could speak, however, he was cut off by coughing from Naruto's prone form. No, not coughing. Laughing? Somehow, this enraged Neji to levels he didn't think he was capable of. What's so funny, loser? Huh! He roared, shocking not only his classmates, but himself as well. More laughter was his answer. Before he could shout again, Naruto cut him off, finally speaking up. I win, the blonde chalked out, before succumbing to another coughing/laughing fit. What dash? Neji started, but before he could finish his question, he had already found his answer. He was outside of the white ring. Naruto had attacked so ferociously that he had lost sight of his surroundings. Naruto had forced him outside of the ring, engaging him with such tenacity that he hadn't even noticed. He tricked me? Looking from his feet, which were most definitely outside of the white ring of the arena, to the still laughing Naruto, who was now working himself to his feet, despite having been juken twice in the chest at full power, it finally sank into Neji's mind. He tricked me. I lost. In a flat voice, that somehow still managed to convey an immense fury, Neji answered his opponent, who was now standing on shaky feet, wiping away some blood from his mouth. So it would seem. Well done, loser. Next time, however, fate itself will show you the consequences of trying to defy it. Prepare yourself. With that, he turned on his heel, hair swaying dramatically behind him, and stormed off into the academy, not sparing a glance backwards at his grinning opponent. I didn't know I could even feel that much pain in so many places at once, Naruto thought to himself with a groan, as he gently poked one of his ribs with a careful touch. A dark chuckling from the back of his mind was his only answer. You think this is pain, little one? This is only a prelude to what is yet to await you. Whatever. I don't care, I'm not letting that stop me, Databeo. There was a brief pause, before the demonic fox finally answered. No, I rather thought that it wouldn't, the Kyuubi said thoughtfully. What the hell do you mean with that, fox? Naruto yelled, but he received no answer. Sighing, Naruto dusted himself off and straightened himself. Already, his wounds were healing, and not bothering him so much. Opening his eyes, Naruto fell back with an eep. Right in front of him, the two roundest eyes he had ever seen were staring at him unblinkingly. Overcoming his shock, Naruto looked the child that was attached to the strange eyes up and down. He vaguely recognized him, but he had only been with his new classmates for a few months, and he didn't really interact with any of them, either training or getting in fights with Neji. Yes, can I help you? He asked hesitantly, though he was a little distracted by the boy's face. It looked like the caterpillars on Bushibrao-sensei's face finally decided to have babies, and those babies traveled to this guy's face. Naruto thought to himself in equal parts horrified fascination and disgust. The disgust part came from the fact that Naruto, being a young orphan in a tough neighborhood in a village filled with psychopaths, knew in great detail just what process was involved in the creation of babies. He'd rather not envision Bushibrao-sensei's eyebrows in that process, thank you very much. He was shaken from his morbid thoughts by the boy in front of him, who looked at him admiringly. That was incredible, Uzumaki-san. You actually managed to defeat Neji, despite him being a genius. Naruto swelled with pride. Having such few people in his life who genuinely cared about him, compliments were a rare and treasured thing to the young child. Heh, that's because I'm Naruto Uzumaki, Databeo. I'm a genius of hard work, and a genius of hard work will always overcome a natural genius. Naruto yelled proudly, thumping himself on the chest. Somehow, the child's gargantuan round eyes managed to grow even larger. A genius of hard work? Naruto nodded with enthusiasm. Yeah, my sensei always said that if you put everything you have in working hard, then you become an even greater ninja than any natural genius. A hopeful look overcame the other boy's face, his massive eyebrows scrunched up in thought. You can become a powerful ninja through hard work? The child thought out loud, a desperate hope coloring his voice. Naruto, picking up his companion's voice, nodded wildly. Yep. I trained a year under him, and I'm gonna keep working as hard as I can to become the strongest ninja Konoha has ever seen, Databeo. Naruto eyed the other boy, scratching his chin in thought. There was something about the kid with the weird eyebrows, something in his impossibly round eyes, that Naruto recognized in himself, back when he thought he was all alone. A look of despair. He hated that look. Having made his decision right there, Naruto clapped the other boy on the shoulder. Hey, if you'd like, we can go visit Sensei and see if he wants to train us some more? The kid's face lit up like the brightest Christmas tree in the history of Christmas. This analogy would have been far more impressive, of course, if people in the elemental even knew what Christmas was, but that's neither here nor there. Nodding so enthusiastically that it made his braid flap around wildly, the other child answered immediately. Yes. Yes, of course I'd like that. Thank you, Uzumaki-san, you shall not regret this, I swear. Naruto simply waved him off, making his way into the academy as well. No problem. Just call me Naruto, Databeo. By the way, what's your name? Hurrying a little in order to keep up with Naruto, the kid answered excitedly. My name's Rock Lee. About a mile away, lying on his futon, the newest Ika in his hand, Hatake Kakashi felt a chill travel down his spine, despite the pleasantly warm weather. Grabbing a kunai from beneath his pillow in a white-knuckled grip, the Jounin lifted his headband, exposing a blood-red eye with 3 spinning tomo in it to the world. Why do I feel like something terrible has happened? He asked himself in a tense whisper, both mismatched eyes flitting across his room. And more importantly, why does it feel like it's somehow guy-related? Hiruzen Sarutobi sat in his office, chewing worriedly on his pipe. While his eyes were trained on the mountains of paperwork on the desk in front of him, his thoughts were elsewhere. Today, the academy students will learn their first technique, the henge. But I am still worried about Naruto. Who knows what he will do now, or how it may harm him, the aged Hokage thought to himself, eyes flittering to where the academy lay. I'll just have to trust him, I suppose? Hiruzen thought with a sigh, as he closed his eyes and leaned back into his chair. Good luck, Naruto. Good luck, Naruto-senpai. Thanks, Lee, you too. Two children were bouncing in their seats, yelling at the top of their lungs, even as they were sitting right next to each other. One was rather short, with sun-yellow hair sitting on his head in an unruly mop, and with 3 whisker marks on either cheek. The boy next to him had long, shiny black hair, fastened into a long braid, and impossibly round eyes and large eyebrows. These were Uzumaki Naruto and Rock Lee, respectively, loud mouths of the academy, and since Naruto's spar with Neji, fast friends. Both shared a similar work ethic and an indomitable spirit. Both respected each other's dream, even when everybody else thought it would always be just that, a dream. While this on its own might have led to the strong friendship both boys shared, it was certainly helped when Naruto took Lee to meet his sensei for the last year. Might Guy, taijutsu expert extraordinaire, and he meant that in every sense of the way. Guy and Lee took one look at each other, and a lifelong bond was forged with the flames of youth. Or so they claimed. Naruto privately thought that their eyebrows had recognized each other as kin, and made their wearers bond because of it. While Guy was now no longer Naruto's teacher, which meant that he was away far more often from the village for high-ranking missions he hadn't been able to do because of his obligations to the blonde, he still left both eager children with tips and advice, even helping them plan out a training regime to keep to when he was gone. So the citizens of Konoha were quickly forced to get used to 2 boys, tearing down their streets in what appeared to be a training exercise. Of course, while Naruto loved training, he also had the attention span of a hyperactive gerbil fed copious amounts of caffeine and sugar. So those exercise runs quickly turned into desperate runs for freedom from pursuing squads of A and BU as Naruto started to prank them again. It had been difficult to get Lee in on the pranks, as he found them dishonorable, and did not wish to antagonize comrades from his own village. However, when Naruto mentioned that there were no ways to increase his flames of youth, and those of his comrades better than by keeping the A and BU on their toes and trying to evade them with all their skill, an unholy fire lit itself in the young boy's unnaturally round eyes. YOSH. In that case, let me allow my flames of youth to fan theirs into an inferno as they chase us in youthful spirit. And with those words, Lee had slipped inside an ANBU storage facility Naruto had found, bottle of itching powder in hand. Turns out, having virtually no chakra at all made you almost invisible to the chakra sensing abilities of most ninja. Even the sensors, ninja whose skills focus solely around that area of expertise, simply felt something small brush their senses and dismissed it as another one of the copious amounts of rats that infested the many underground systems of Konoha. While the boys quickly figured out that Lee had a greatly easier time sneaking into places he wasn't allowed to be than Naruto did, both boys wouldn't really grasp the full potential of Lee's small chakra reserves until several years later. The irate, not to mention itchy ANBU, however, catoned down immediately, and grudgingly prepared a spot amongst their numbers for the chakra-less shinobi. Hell, if the kid didn't cut it at the academy, which seemed likely, then the ANBU could think of several uses for an undetectable ninja, even if he couldn't do jutsu. After all, whether you got burned to crisp by a fireball, or simply received a kunai to the throat, you were still just as dead either way. And ANBU were all about results. For now, however, both ANBU and potential assassination missions were far from either boy's mind, as they were bouncing in their seats. Because today, they would set their first step on the long road to their ultimate goal, the first step in achieving their lifelong dream. Today, they would learn their very first technique. The teachers had guided everyone through unlocking their chakra, even though Naruto had already unlocked his, something only a few other clan children had accomplished as well, Neji Hyuga being among them, to the Uzumaki's ire. Those that failed to unlock their chakra, either due to lack of skill or due lack of required chakra, were not so subtly turned towards other branches of Konoha's military, that didn't require chakra to fulfill. This only left those with a large enough pool of chakra for it to be useful and large enough skill to make use of it, Lee a noticeable exception, only his record-breaking scores in taijutsu and a personal request from Guy keeping him from being sent away from the academy. Those that were left were all giddy with excitement, even the stoic Neji, eager to learn their first real shinobi skill. Sure, they had had weapon training before, and taijutsu as well, both essential parts of any ninja's arsenal. But that wasn't something exclusive to their special brand of mercenaries. Any civilian with the proper motivation could do the same. Hell, with his chakra reserves as low as they were, Rock Lee could be considered just that. But ninjutsu, That was the stuff of every boy's dream, to tame the very elements themselves, to do the impossible but with a mere flick of one's hand, to perform feats no non-shinobi could ever hope to match. As a result, both boys were positively vibrating in their seats. Yes, one had far too much chakra for any academy-level technique to work properly, and yes, the other had too little, but that just made things more interesting for the two geniuses of hard and intelligent work. Their sensei cleared his throat, and all of the unruly children, but especially Lee and Naruto, settled down. Nobody wanted to miss this. Today we will start you on your first technique. While all of the Academy 3 find regular use amongst even Jounin-level shinobi, they are also rather simple to teach, as they require relatively little amounts of chakra to use. Be advised, however, that this also means that they are easily countered by enemy shinobi, as they are all known and well versed throughout the elemental countries, be it with slight local variations. It's the reason why we don't simply use a henge and walk through another hidden village's front gate. They would spot it immediately, and the resulting onslaught of weaponry and jutsu would turn you into a mix between a pincushion and a roast spit. Several girls looked rather green at that remark, though if the instructor noticed, he didn't comment on it, instead continuing with the lecture in a sharp voice. Don't bother trying to use the kawarami as anything other than a quick escape. The only person on record to have been capable of using it as a combat tactic is a prodigious Uchiha, with a powerful dojutsu, even by their standards. Don't look at me like that, Hyuga. Your eyes are powerful, yes, but until any of you can perceive time at a rate of 1 to 20, don't even think about it. You just get turned into a roast spit for your troubles. Several girls had turned white now, though still the instructor did not relent. Bunshin are easily seen through, if you know where to look. They have no shadow, they leave no imprint, their clothes and hair are unruffled by any wind. For the observant eye, it becomes immediately clear they are nothing more than mere illusions, not worthy of attention. Think you can hide yourself amid several clones as you make your attack, confident your opponent will not be able to tell which one is the real you. Once again, a skilled opponent will simply not even bother with the clones, thank you politely for bringing yourself within his range without any effort on his part, and turn you into a roast spit. The instructor let out an evil smirk, letting his eyes roam across the class of terrified children. You'll find that the more skilled ninja have a habit for turning people into roast spits. Not healthy, but to each his own, I suppose. Now, the teacher said, slamming his hand down onto the desk with a large clap, making several girls, and a few boys shriek in terror. Does that mean that what you will learn here is completely useless for you against enemy shinobi? Quite frankly, yes. At that a hushed silence fell across the class, every child confused at the statement, but all of them too terrified to ask for an explanation. Again, the teacher's gaze swept around the room, though this time his stern voice was more solemn. Shinobi you may be if you graduate this academy, but seasoned warriors you are not. Each one of you has the potential to become one, however. All of you possess a chance to be truly great. But you will not become that here. Instead, in teams of 3, you will be paired with a teacher and teammates best suited in your interest, who can help you the most in fully realizing your potential. It is why a mission is B-ranked whenever possible contact with enemy shinobi is within the mission parameters. It is also the reason why a rookie genin will never, ever go on a B mission of any kind. It is simply too dangerous, even if the enemy are mere genin as well. This does not, however, mean that you will not run into danger along the way. Bandits, criminals, yakuza, hell, maybe even a ronin, these are all foes you are likely to face, and these are all foes that will not hesitate to cut you down. Which is where the Academy 3 come in. A shinobi will easily counter them, but a civilian, even a trained one? You might just stand a chance. Use Bunshin to show confusion and avoid being targeted. In the heat of battle, it's unlikely they'll notice absent shadows or footprints. Use a henge to either impersonate their fellows, or if possible, an innocent bystander. If you find yourself being hunted down, use the henge to throw off your pursuers. Still manage to get yourself into a tight spot? Kawarami the fuck away, and hightail it out of there and towards your sensei. He's still alive, because if he isn't, you wouldn't be either. The instructor let his heavy gaze slowly roam around the class once more, taking in each face. There were the blubbering messes, of course, mostly civilian children that so far thought that weapon training and learning how to fight were more like some outlandish game than true shinobi preparation. A shame, since if they managed to get here, that meant that they still had the potential for a viable chakra pool. No matter, if they didn't make it, then Konoha still had use for them, in any number of ways. A nice shinobi village it may be, it was still a shinobi village and no resource went wasted. Next were those with quiet, determined expressions on their young faces. Children of clans mostly, who had heard this message hundreds of times before from various family members, or simply watched some come home who hadn't heeded it themselves. The stoic Hyuga was a good example, face a carefully blank mask, even as pupilless eyes shone with an iron will. Even some civilian children had managed to show some spine, and did not appear to be daunted by his speech. That girl, Tenten, for instance, who even now was showing an almost unnatural proficiency with ranged weapons of any kind and even turning some melee weapons into ranged ones. The double-bladed battle-axe stuck in a poor, defenseless training dummy had been particularly interesting. And then there were the odd ones. During his tale, and with each horrific warning, two faces simply lit up in joy and determination. One was nodding along with every caution he gave, every tip he provided, while the other sat furiously scribbling away in a little notebook, jotting down each and every word as if it were gospel. Uzumaki Naruto and Rock Lee, troublemakers extraordinaire and with more guts than most Chunin. This is gonna be interesting. Another month had passed as the class was working on their first technique. Each year in the academy focused on one technique, and after 3 years, you had to perform them all adequately enough in order to graduate and claim your headband. It took a year for a single technique due to the face that the academy was supposed to provide aspiring ninja with a basis in everything. Not only did this mean the classic combination of taijutsu, weapon handling and ninjutsu on top of it, it also had to concern itself with more esoteric, but no less useful, shinobi aspects of life, such as code breaking or poisons. On top of that, since the academy left no time for a regular preschool, it also had to fulfill mundane duties, such as teaching them reading and writing, mathematics and history. An illiterate ninja was a useless ninja. So Naruto understood why they were taking a whole year just for a single technique. Really, he did. It was just too damned slow. Training under a year under Guy, while monotonous at times, due to being focused almost solely on conditioning his body, had rather spoiled Naruto when it came to education. Sure, Guy had forced to keep up with his letters and numbers, but other than that it had been non-stop training day in and day out. Something that Lee, once told about it, had almost salivated over. And while he and his new best friend tried to hurry things along as fast as they could by sparring and training almost every waking hour, it still didn't feel fast enough for the hyperactive blonde. Further fueling Naruto's sense of urgency was Niji's success with the henge. Well, success might be exaggerating it a little bit. Sometimes, certain aspects of the henge would be hazy, or even transparent. Other times, and rather often at that, Niji's perspective as a child would mess up his proportions and size whenever he tried to do an adult. Something Naruto took savage glee in pointing out. Only to be shot down by Niji's cool, at least I managed to produce something resembling the human form, and not simply swirls of chakra that flow around without function or purpose. Which was true. While Lee struggled to draw out any chakra at all to cover himself with for the technique, Naruto struggled with drawing out too much. Way too much. Instead of a film, placed over his body in the form he wanted his henge to be, Naruto unfailingly produced a thick sheen of chakra, sometimes, usually when he was frustrated, almost a foot thick. While it had awed some of the other children with its sheer display of power, it only pissed Naruto off, which in turn made his controls slip only further. Which is why one day, standing with the other children on the field, Niji's mocking eyes boring into his back and his scary sensei looming over him, that Naruto gave in and snapped. Kami, damn it all, why won't this just work? Kit, if you don't stop your yammering, I will. Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but rest assured, the results won't be pretty. The great and feared Kyubi no Kitsune replied, sounding for all the world as if he were just woken from his nap. Which he probably was. In the year that Naruto had met the fox, he had found that the great demon slept a lot, though he always gave shifty half-truths and avoiding answers whenever Naruto asked about it. The best he could piece together was that he was leeching power of the fox, and the trauma of being sealed, as well as the energy required to actually talk to Naruto, meant that the fox was almost always tired, which was why it laid down almost all the time, even during the rare times Naruto visited him, something that piqued the interest of the Hokage, and that of several other shinobi. Now, however, it was definitely not sleeping, sounding pissed off at Naruto for being the cause of that. I can't help it. I keep taking too much chakra for the technique, and I keep messing it up. I can't control it enough to take the little I need. Then why settle for a little? What? A great rumbling sigh, which gave Naruto the feeling as if his brain was rattling around in his head. You have an ocean's worth of chakra and you're trying to cram it down a tiny faucet. Instead, remove the faucet and simply work with the ocean you have. Okay, I'll try. Try is going to get you killed. You need to do it. Right. I'm gonna do it. With that, Naruto furrowed his brow and reached for the chakra within him once again. This time, instead of drawing out a little to create a film over his body, he instead went straight to the source of his power and brought it to the surface of his skin. He felt his chakra fill his body, even as his skin started to be enveloped in a slight blue glow. Not wanting to create a repeat of his previous attempts, he immediately went through the hand signs for the henge, a small part of him distractedly noting the flash of irritation when he noticed that it didn't go nearly as smooth and fast as Niji did it. It was quickly shoved to the back of his mind as he stopped on the final sign, and called out the technique, while trying to envision the person he was henging into down to the smallest detail. Henge. A thick cloud of smoke enveloped his form with a small poof, obscuring him from view. His sensei, impatient to see the result of his most troublesome student, several Nara sneezed, he quickly blew away the smoke with a minor futon technique. Only to reveal the Hokage, staring down at him, lip pipe clenched between his teeth. Hokage-sama? What are you doing here? The instructor blurted out in surprise. He knew he had overstepped his bounds when the Hokage narrowed his eyes at him. Are you telling me I cannot be wherever I wish to be within my own village, Chunin? The aged leader asked dangerously. And no, of course